Chapter 946. Friend or Enemy. Most of the time, the so-called fate and different directions were chosen in an instant. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and looked at Zhang Xiangyu's outstretched palm. Zhang Xiangyu's expression was calm and serious. The smile that seemed to cover his face at all times disappeared completely. His voice was clear, firm and steady. This was the Zhang Xiangyu he was familiar with, fragile and somewhat weak. He might be a genius in other people's eyes, but in Li Tianlan's eyes, it was just a piece of cake to kill him. Zhang Xiangyu did not have the strength to threaten him, let alone the power to threaten him. But at this moment, he really felt a sense of oppression that was not strong but real. The hand reached in front of him, and his life seemed to really have two directions. To the left or to the right. I think of our first meeting. Li Tianlan's voice was calm and cold. Zhang Xiangyu frowned slightly. You mean in East Island? Li Tianlan glanced at him. I'm not sure what the reason is, but I can be sure of my feeling. Maybe it's your eyes when I first saw you, or maybe it's your expression. It seems that everything is normal. But every time I think about it, I have a very uncomfortable feeling. You can say it's intuition. From that moment on, I was sure that we would not be friends. His voice was clear, and his eyes were clear and rational. Zhang Xiangyu looked at him for a long time. So, he said slowly, Your Majesty, are you rejecting my kindness? Your kindness means nothing to me. We are not friends. As for whether we are enemies or not, I don't care. If I have to make it clear, you are not qualified to be my friend or my enemy. Li Qingqing is not my private property. I brought her out of Kunlun City, and I didn't want to control her. She is free, and I will respect her will. You must also respect it. There is no possibility of a deal in this matter. Zhang Xiangyu narrowed his eyes. His expression became indifferent little by little. The palm slowly retracted. The corner of his mouth moved, and he was about to speak. Think about the consequences before you speak. Li Tianlan said blandly, I didn't kill you today because I saw your sincerity and respect Li Qingqing. If you don't know what's good for you, you don't have to go back today. Zhang Xiangyu's expression froze slightly. He laughed. I see. In that case, Your Majesty. He bowed slightly with a meaningful look in his eyes. Goodbye. Li Tianlan did not respond. Zhang Xiangyu jumped directly from the rooftop. His figure landed on the ground and strode out of the sanatorium. He did not look back from the beginning to the end. Li Tianlan looked at his back quietly. He could feel Zhang Xiangyu's determination. That was not giving up. Instead, it was a determination to do whatever it took. Lin Yuxian appeared silently beside Li Tianlan. His eyes were a little complicated. What will he do? I don't know. Li Tianlan shook his head expressionlessly. But I have an intuition that it might be a wrong decision not to kill him tonight. Then why not kill him? Lin Yuxian had some doubts. Zhang Xiangyu's status in Jianghu state was not low now. But if Li Tianlan insisted on killing him, no one could stop him. There might be trouble afterward, but Emperor Dong's palace could handle it. In that case, why not do it? Because of Li Qingqing, Li Tianlan smiled and said, the life of Li Shi and Gu Xingyun is not harmonious. Li Qingqing grew up with them. You know what she thinks about marriage and feelings without thinking. She even made it clear just now that she would not consider the idea of marriage in this life. She left you such a rival in love and let you compete with each other. Maybe it can help you. Otherwise, if you only rely on yourself to pester Li Qingqing, it is basically impossible. Damn, you don't believe in my charm? Lin Yuxian stared and was a little speechless. This is my brother-in-law's understanding of my brother-in-law. Li Tianlan laughed. Lin Yuxian chuckled without emotion and suddenly said, That's not the whole reason, is it? Yes. Li Tianlan nodded. One more thing. If I kill him tonight, I feel that there will be trouble too. It's better to keep him alive and see who is behind him first. Walking out of the sanatorium, Zhang Xiangyu, who did not feel embarrassed at all without a special car to pick him up, waited for a long time before he got a taxi. The taxi went straight to the airport. In the back of the car, Zhang Xiangyu took out his mobile phone and dialed a number. The phone was quickly connected, but there was no sound. How is it? Zhang Xiangyu coughed and asked. The negotiations have fallen apart. On the other end of the phone, The calm voice sounded emotionless. I was splashed with a glass of lemonade. Heh, doesn't she care that she's a fake? Xianxia sneered. She said I'm exhausted. Xianxia fell silent and tried to think about the meaning of this sentence. After a while he slowly said, I can imagine but I can't understand. What about you? On the other end of the phone, His Majesty who was far away in Xianxia City asked. The negotiations have fallen apart. Xianxia said calmly. His Majesty sighed. You're really useless. Hee. Xianxia said expressionlessly, keep scolding. Don't stop. Be ruthless. His Majesty was speechless. He was also Xianxia. Their experiences might be different, but in essence they were the same person, and their thinking was completely the same. If they swore, they would be scolding themselves, and even the words they said were the same. Let's snatch him. After a moment of silence, the two of them spoke in unison. Let's take him back first. They spoke in unison as well. After a short silence, Xianxia agreed and looked at the scenery outside the rough car. We'll talk about it when I get to Xianxia City. On the rooftop, Li Tianlan accompanied Lin Yuxian to smoke a cigarette. He glanced at him and said with a smile, Hey, are you still depressed? Don't think so much. There will always be opportunities in the future. If I were you, I would go to get close to Li Qingqing now. What are you thinking about here? Lin Yuxian snorted. If you were me, would you really go? No. Li Tianlan thought for a moment. It's not easy to be a bootlicker. You can also catch up with my sister like this. God is blind. Lin Yuxian looked disdainful. How many times have I said that it's your sister who chased me? Li Tianlan sighed. We're not the same. Not the same. The phone suddenly rang. Li Tianlan took out his mobile phone and glanced at the number. His eyes softened slightly, and he directly pressed the answer button. He said with a smile, What are you doing? Looking at the night view. Qin Weibai on the other end of the phone smiled softly and said softly, The night view of Xianxia City is very beautiful. Li Tianlan nodded. I'll go back tomorrow. I'll accompany you then. Qin Weibai was silent for a moment and said softly, I'm afraid not. Tianlan, I have to go back to the headquarters of the Lin clan and come back in a few days. The problem in South America? Li Tianlan frowned slightly. Qin Weibai hesitated for a moment and nodded. Yes, but it won't be long. I'll be back soon. Chapter 947. The phone was hung up in Li Tianlan's laughter. Xianxia City was brightly lit at night. The streets were clean and tidy, the buildings were exquisite and magnificent, the grass was green, the flowers were in full bloom, and the trees were neat. The lights were on. It was as if the entire city had been draped in a colorful coat of light. The night here was not so noisy and bustling, but there was a kind of vitality from silence and beauty. Qin Weibai quietly looked at the scenes outside the window. She didn't say a word and just watched in silence. Why do you suddenly want to go back to the headquarters of the Lin clan? Horsewoman drove and suddenly asked in a low voice. It's really beautiful. Qin Weibai looked out of the window and muttered to herself. Then she laughed at herself. I'm afraid it's not mine. Horsewoman frowned and was a little puzzled. I just saw Xianxia. Qin Weibai lowered her head and whispered. Horsewoman responded. She also saw it, although she didn't know what Xianxia talked to the boss. When I met Xianxia, Tianlan also saw Xianxia. Qin Weibai's voice was deep and quiet. The black Rolls-Royce suddenly stopped in the middle of driving. Qin Weibai's body swayed and leaned forward slightly. Horsewoman's face changed dramatically. She suddenly looked back at Qin Weibai in disbelief. Qin Weibai was in Tiannan. Li Tianlan was in Yuzhou. The two of them saw Xianxia at the same time? How is this possible? Horsewoman subconsciously raised her voice, a little incredulous. Nothing is impossible. Qin Weibai said indifferently, just like now, I'm in Tiannan, but I'm also in the headquarters of the Lin clan. Horsewoman breathed violently. At that moment, she was completely stunned. He. Horsewoman frowned tightly and looked solemn. He and the palace master. Probably the same. It's hard to explain what's going on. But I can come back, so can he. Qin Weibai whispered. Horsewoman's brain was a little confused. After a while, she understood what it meant. We have enemies. Horsewoman took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, an unimaginable enemy. There were 12 supermasters in the Samsara Palace. But the status of supermasters was also high and low. In reality, Fire Flaming Realm, one of the 12 supermasters, was naturally the most important, and he was once the only supermaster of the Invincible Realm. Next were the military counselor and the saint. And then there were the dukes and generals whose strength was only second to the saint and the military advisor. Instead, there were the knights whose strength might not be the best but were absolutely loyal. They knew the origin of the palace master from the very beginning. They also knew the inside story of the initial rise and rapid development of the Samsara Palace. The 12 supermasters were very high profile in the dark world. Lurk in the shadows, the saber of Jianghu State. A strategist who had absolute control over the economy. The Flourishing Age Fund, whose funds could sweep the world, certainly had Han Donglo's ability, but it also had the foresight of the palace master. For more than a decade, they seized the opportunities again and again, and the Samsara Palace completed its accumulation at the fastest speed. The core of all this was the master of Samsara Palace. She was the master of Samsara Palace who knew what would happen before it happened. But now, the master of Samsara Palace was in an extremely bad state. She was almost dead. Xianxia appeared. Xianxia, who could predict the future like the master of Samsara Palace, appeared. Horsewoman couldn't imagine how powerful Xianxia had secretly cultivated. The fact that he could openly appear in front of Qin Weibai and Li Tianlan already showed his attitude. He was so confident that he could almost be fearless of everything. It's not that serious. Qin Weibai shook her head. His state is a little special. When I came back that year, my foster father spent a lot of effort to stabilize my injury. Then, at the earliest time I found myself. Xianxia was not so lucky. He has been in a bad state these years and can't do too many things. But, since he dared to appear in front of me, it means that he is indeed ready. It's a little troublesome, but it's not impossible to solve. Horsewoman was silent for a long time before she whispered, what was Xianxia's strength in his heyday? He broke through the peak of the Invincible Realm and was only half a step away from the real Supreme. He was a person who really exerted the Heavenly King heart to the extreme. His willpower was indestructible, and his cultivation progressed rapidly. He could constantly make up for his shortcomings while making progress. He was not the same as the trash in Kunlun City who also had the Heavenly King heart but was not even in the Invincible Realm. In that era, Tianlan in his peak state could ignore everything. After Tianlan, Wang Tianzong managed to enter that realm, but it was not perfect. Then, Wang Xianxia was the closest to that realm. After the father and son of the Wang family of Beihai, it was Zhang Shangyu, followed by Lin Yuxian of the Lin clan. If we talk about the combat capability in his heyday, Zhang Shangyu in his peak state is stronger than Mr. Lin and Li Kuang too. If we really want to compare, he is probably similar to Tribulation in his peak state and Wang Tianzong when he left Reki City. If it weren't for Ruthless, I wouldn't have been able to kill him and Wang Xiangxiao. Well, at that time, Ruthless didn't break out with all his strength, but really self-destructed. It wanted to kill not only Wang Xiangxiao and Zhang Shangyu, but also me. It destroyed everything, and then it became what it is now. Then now, Horsewoman wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. He has the blood of vermilion bird and black tortoise that have evolved to the last stage in his body. At present, no one in the world can solve this level of poison. At most, they can barely suppress it. It is impossible for him to return to his peak state. Now, Tianlan is only short of accumulation and the final transformation from the real Supreme Realm. With Ruthless, he can't threaten Tianlan's safety. But since he dared to appear, it means that he should also have the ability to protect himself. Qin Weibai's voice gradually became a little low. I'm not worried about what will happen to Tianlan. Now, except for himself, there should be no one who can hurt him. Zhang Shangyu is a bit tricky, but there will be time to deal with him in the future. Her voice became softer and softer. What I'm worried about now is how to tell Tianlan about this. This should be told to His Majesty. Horsewoman was slightly shocked. How can I not tell him? Qin Weibai smiled bitterly. It's meaningless to hide such a serious thing. We must let Tianlan know the possible consequences of Jianghu and his current strength. How can he not tell him? Horsewoman fell silent. So, she was silent for a long time before hesitantly saying, "Did you go back to the headquarters of the Lin clan to see the situation of the palace master?" Yes and no. Qin Weibai shook her head, leaned against the seat, and closed her eyes. I'm really tired, she whispered. Staying with Tianlan, I'm very happy, but also very tired. I know I am. We have the same thoughts, the same behavior, and even when we stand together we have the same feeling. Can you understand? When I'm with me, it's not that I know what you're thinking. It's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking. My thoughts, senses, movements, everything is exactly the same, without each other. I am me. When I'm with her, at a close distance, I don't need to read the notebook that deepens the impression at all. I can directly read the pictures that I haven't experienced in that era, but I have experienced them from my mind. We are the same person. I firmly believe it, accept it, and even believe it. But it's still very tiring. When I see Tianlan, I can take it for granted that we are the same person. But when I'm with him, every time he looks at me, hugs me and even presses on me, I feel that he is looking at another person. That person is me but not me. This kind of feeling. Qin Weibai's voice was a little desperate. Do you understand? Horsewoman was silent for a long time before she shook her head slightly. In fact, whether I am me or not, in Tianlan's eyes, maybe it's different? In military counselor's heart, it's the same in Flaming Fire's heart, and it should be the same in his heart. So, Jianghu said that I'm an imposter. Oh, I really can't be an imposter. In fact, before this, we knew the existence of Jianghu. I'm just not sure who he is. I imagined the day when all this would be exposed, but I didn't expect it to come so soon. Jianghu is an enemy. His Majesty may not believe what he said. Horsewoman comforted with a pale face. I'm not sure if it's a lie, but things have come to this point. Maybe it's not a lie, but a lie. Qin Weibai muttered to herself, I'm really tired. You don't understand that kind of feeling. I love him as much as I love him. It's a completely consistent, strong feeling. But in his heart, I may be different. I don't want to go on like this. She whispered, every time I see myself in the Lin clan, I will firmly believe that we are the same person. So I want to go back and see my own state. In any case, at the right time, I will tell Tianlan everything. I'm his woman, not my substitute. I want him to accept the real me. Nothing else. It's hard to understand. Horsewoman was silent for a long time before she said frankly, I can understand your incomprehension. Qin Weibai smiled. That's why I feel so tired. Horsewoman hesitated. What if His Majesty doesn't accept your identity? If he thinks you are not you, like Flaming Fire, what will you do then? There's no way. Qin Weibai's eyes were calm and a little empty. With Jianghu's existence, this seemingly flawless secret will be revealed sooner or later. Tianlan will know it sooner or later. The only difference is whether I tell him or someone else tells him. It's better to get the pain over with. She whispered, when I come back from the Lin clan, I will confess everything to him. Even the light outside the window shone on her face. That exquisite and perfect dreamy face was pale and almost transparent. She shook her head hard and whispered, even if it's my end. Chapter 948. In the dead of night, Li Tianlan sat on the rooftop of the sanatorium and enjoyed the breeze. Once again, Wuxia turned into Li Tianlan and sat with him. The vast and majestic sword energy fluctuated with its appearance. The dense sword energy spread from the rooftop and eventually covered the whole sanatorium. This sword chi was so perfect and flawless that it didn't even have a single flaw. Instead, it looked like an airtight domain. Li Tianlan reached out his hand and poked the sword energy around him in boredom. The sword energy was like a transparent cover. As he stretched his fingers forward, the sword energy broke one after another like a cover. The small holes appeared one after another and were silently patched by Wuxia. Then he poked it again and patched it again slowly. A man and a sword played the game out of boredom. Eventually, the whole sanatorium was filled with surging sword light. Your Majesty! A voice suddenly rang out at the door of the rooftop. Saint walked over with a food box and a pot of wine. He said helplessly, What are you doing? Li Tianlan answered blankly, as if he couldn't react. Wuxia silently withdrew the domain of sword energy and turned it into a cloak. He put it on Li Tianlan to block the cold wind. Saint shook his head with a bitter smile. He had been pursuing swordsmanship all his life. He was the sword master of Mount Shu. Later he became a saint. He still learned Dongqing Huangtu's swordsmanship, which was also Li Tianlan's swordsmanship. Now that he had entered the invincible realm, his perception of swordsmanship had reached the extreme. He had fallen asleep, but Li Tianlan and Wuqia's game seemed to be silent. However, the surging sword energy was like a dazzling light to Saint, easily dispelling all his sleepiness. It was his boss who disturbed his dreams. What else could he do? He could only pack up and rush over. Can't sleep. Saint walked to Li Tianlan and sat down beside him. He opened the food box. There was only a stack of spiced beef in the food box. It was simple, but it was enough. There were 2 empty cups beside the beef. Saint took out the cups, handed one to Li Tianlan, and poured wine for him. The wine was mellow and slightly warm. Last time I went back to Tiannan, I asked for a batch of good wine from Senior Yu. The Huadiao wine he made is very famous even in the Hidden Dragon Sea Council. Saint said with a smile. Li Tianlan's eyes were in a trance. He took a sip of wine and became more and more silent. His Majesty can't sleep? Is there something on your mind? Saint asked again. I'm fine. It's just, I don't know what you're thinking. Li Tianlan was somewhat absent-minded. He really didn't know what he was thinking, but his mind was a little chaotic, and he didn't feel sleepy at all. He grabbed a piece of beef with sauce and put it into his mouth. He shook his head hard and took another sip of wine. I'm thinking about a lot of things, he said softly. The future of Emperor Dong's palace, my future. I miss the Li family, my grandpa, the carefree life of the Wang family of Beihai and the Lin clan, my own life experience, a lot of things. It's a mess. Or maybe I don't think about anything. Your Majesty is thinking about the Dongqing clan? Saint asked with a smile after a moment of silence. Maybe. Li Tianlan nodded. Parents. Mom and Dad. This word is very strange. He gulped down the wine and shook his head slightly. There were some things that were completely different from saying it out loud. Li Shi, who sobered up, told his life experience in the clearest manner as the person involved. It was a very strange feeling. For a long time, he didn't quite understand why the Dongqing clan would give him unconditionally. He didn't understand why the giant group made plans with him as the core. He didn't understand why Dongqing Wudi and Bai Qingqian accepted Qin Weibai and Wang Yuetong so easily. He didn't understand why Bai Qingqian and the Dongqing clan almost turned against each other and became enemies. He didn't understand why Bai Qingqian and the Dongqing clan almost fell out and became enemies. He slowly realized something. And everything Li Shi said was the answer to all his incomprehensible questions. Li Tianlan's heart was a little chaotic, but he couldn't tell what specific emotion it was. It was a very subtle psychological activity, so subtle that he didn't even form any specific emotion or feeling. He fought with Gu Xingyun, attended the meeting of the parliament, watched the changes in Beijing, listened to Lin Fengting talk about the origin of murderous weapons, and watched Jiang Shangyu perform to his heart's content. Today was undoubtedly very lively, and he lived a fulfilling life. When everything was over and he was alone, Li Tianlan's mind became a little complicated. I thought your Majesty was worried about the next decisive battle in Beihai. Saint smiled. Li Tianlan shook his head and didn't speak. He really didn't think about it. Even if he knew the existence of Wuyo. No matter whether it was self-confidence or brainlessness, Li Tianlan's heart was firm. He was sure that he was invincible now, and he didn't care who his opponent was. Subtle footsteps sounded from behind the two of them, and they didn't hide it. Li Tianlan and Saint turned back at the same time. Li Shi, who was dressed neatly and looked a little pale, appeared at the door of the rooftop. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows slightly. Are you going out? He asked directly. Li Shi nodded and whispered, I will come back before I go to Shenyuan City tomorrow. Li Tianlan nodded and asked subconsciously, Where are we going? Li Shi shook her head and didn't say much. She had a free identity, and from tomorrow on, a new life. If this night was a farewell to the past, then Li Shi always felt that she should say thank you to some people. Li Tianlan took a deep look at her and didn't ask any more questions. He just said, "Be careful on the way. Go early and come back early." Li Shi said yes and turned to leave. Saint watched her back gradually disappear, then shook his head and whispered, "It's so late, Your Majesty. Where did she say she was going?" Li Tianlan was silent for a while, then said softly, "I don't know." At the same time, Tiannan, Shenyuan City. In an exquisite hotel suite in the city center, Xianxia opened the door and saw himself standing outside the door. "I just received the news." Without any pleasantries, Xianxia said, "Qin Weibai has left Tiannan." There was an inexplicable aura surging in the room. The space was slightly distorted. A blurry and hazy cloud and starlight completely enveloped his body. He became His Majesty again. It should be the problem of the Jiang family of South America. After all, she is the patriarch of the Lin clan. His Majesty said, not surprised at all. "It's a pity. If she stayed in Shenyuan City." Jiang Shangyu shook his head slightly. Everyone was afraid of the fallen master of Samsara Palace, but in terms of force, no one would be afraid of Qin Weibai. Many people were afraid of His Majesty, but no one was afraid of Jiang Shangyu. Jiang Shangyu was too young to become a real expert of the invincible realm. His Majesty was different. His physical strength was fixed. In terms of strength, what he needed was not progress, but recovery. What was more, Qin Weibai basically knew nothing about martial arts. If he could control him, Li Tianlan wouldn't be able to hold on to Li Qingqing. How can it be so simple? His Majesty shook his head, was silent for a while and asked, "How's Dad?" "There's no problem." Jiang Shangyu said, "The pension will be in place within 3 days. During this time, Dad will talk to some people in Beijiang and control them so that there won't be any accidents. In other words, control Beijiang so that there won't be any accidents." 3 days, His Majesty whispered to himself, nodded and said, "Then 3 days later, I'll fight Li Tianlan." Jiang Shangyu raised his eyebrows slightly. "Then I'll start to sleep tomorrow." His Majesty nodded and said slowly, "Let's sleep longer this time. 3 days later, I'll fight Li Tianlan, and at the same time, it will officially start the final battle in Beihai and the chaos in East Island. In order to prevent accidents, don't stop sleeping." "There's not enough nutrient solution." Jiang Shangyu frowned slightly. "I know, so I'll solve everything as soon as possible." His Majesty smiled. "If everything goes well, when I wake up, Li Tianlan should have died. He refused to be my friend, so I'll let him know how serious the consequences of his refusal will be." Jiang Shangyu shrugged. "Be careful. I don't think Li Tianlan is so simple now. That's how I feel." "Of course I know." His Majesty's voice was calm. "That's why we need this final battle as a test." He took out his mobile phone, opened the address book, and directly dialed Li Guangtu's number. The phone rang twice, and then it was picked up. Li Guangtu's deep voice sounded a little dignified. "What's the matter? Don't be nervous." His Majesty smiled. "Nothing has changed. I'm just telling you a sudden decision." Li Guangtu was silent for a moment. On the other end of the phone, he seemed to look at the time, and then his voice became a little irritated. "Say it. 3 days later, I'll challenge Li Tianlan." His Majesty's voice was calm and firm. Li Guangtu suddenly fell silent. He seemed to be trying hard to digest the news. After a while he asked, "Why?" "It doesn't matter." His Majesty's voice was calm. "Well, it doesn't matter," Li Guangtu repeated, and his voice became lower and lower. "So, you want me to cooperate with you?" The original plan was to cooperate with His Majesty in the final battle in Beihai, sneak attack Li Tianlan, and kill him with one blow. But His Majesty, who was hiding in the dark, suddenly decided to come out. Didn't he need to consider the final battle in Beihai? "No, there's no need." His Majesty said blandly, "I'll test his strength first. Believe me, for now, I'm one of the people who knows Li Tianlan, Wuxia, and the 13th floor the best. Only when I make a move can I determine his current state. This final battle will attract everyone's attention. Taking advantage of this opportunity, my friends and I will complete the final infiltration in these 3 days. Your Highness, if there's nothing else, We can probably enter Beihai tomorrow to make the early preparations. Li Guangtu chuckled and said in a strange tone, attract everyone's attention? Are you sure that the challenge won't be regarded as a clown and then completely ignored? No. Xianxia said softly. In this era, no one dares to ignore me. Including Li Tianlan. Chapter 949. At dawn, Dongqing Wudi opened his eyes and found that the warm, soft and fragrant body beside him seemed to have left for a long time. Half of the quilt had become cold, just like the feeling in the past many years. He was in a trance for a while, as if he was not sure whether it was reality or a dream. After more than 10 seconds, he laughed at himself, sat up slowly, put on his clothes and walked out of the room. The lights were on in the corridor of the villa outside the door. Because it was on the 4th floor, in a more private space, the small reception area at the corner at the end of the corridor had been transformed into a small kitchen. Dongqing Wudi sniffed and his expression became softer. Bai Qingqian, who got up early, was frying eggs in the small kitchen. Beside her was cooked porridge and a few strangely shaped deep-fried pancakes that had been completed. Hungry. Dongqing Wudi walked to the kitchen and looked at his wife. He laughed and said, if I wait a little longer, Sister Wu will probably get up. Why did you cook in person today? I made breakfast for both of us. Bai Qingqian, who was wearing an apron, put the fried eggs on the plate and whispered, I have a flight this afternoon. Dongqing Wudi froze for a moment and then fell silent. Bai Qingqian was the speaker of Liaodong. Naturally, she could not stay in Yuzhou. During this time, she had been holding meetings in Yuzhou. There was less than a year before the election, and all aspects were sensitive. Today, she would go to the Hidden Dragon Sea to attend a speakers' conference of Jianghu State, which was also the highlight of this series of meetings, or even the finale. This meeting could basically determine some things that all parties had been psychologically prepared for, and even determine Bai Qingqian's new position after the election. Then she would rush back to Liaodong overnight. The next time the couple would meet would probably be the election in October next year. I may not have time to see you off. It depends on the situation. I'll try my best to make time. Dongqing Wudi was silent for a moment and whispered. No need. Bai Qingqian scooped 2 bowls of porridge and placed some delicate and delicious side dishes on the table. You do what you need to do. I'll try my best to come back during the Spring Festival. Dongqing Wudi gave a wry smile and shook his head. The Spring Festival was a holiday for ordinary people, but for them, it was impossible for them to be idle at all, especially in the year before the general election. It was almost impossible for the speakers to leave their posts. Even if Bai Qingqian could really come back, Dongqing Wudi would be too busy during the Spring Festival. He had to go to various places in Jianghu State on behalf of the army headquarters to pay New Year's greetings to the soldiers and inspect their work. Can't bear to part with it. Bai Qingqian sat down, raised her eyebrows and said with a faint smile, at most, I can return to Yuzhou in a year. Can't you wait a year? How is this a year? Dongqing Wudi sighed and frowned. He no longer had the demeanor of a god of massacre. I've waited for more than 20 years before I tasted the sweetness. Bai Qingqian's face turned red. She angrily picked up her chopsticks and knocked Dongqing Wudi on the head, saying bitterly, you're talking nonsense. It's the truth. Dongqing Wudi felt a little helpless. Bai Qingqian held her chopsticks, and her face became redder. The relationship between them had been stiff for more than 20 years, and they almost became enemies. Although their relationship had eased a little in recent years, as a husband and wife, they had only recently started to sleep together. Dongqing Wudi was reluctant to leave, and Bai Qingqian naturally didn't want to leave. But she had responsibilities. What else could she do but leave? She lowered her head and took a sip of porridge. She said calmly, isn't the Black Dragon Army in Longjiang? Yes. Dongqing Wudi nodded subconsciously. Bai Qingqian glared at him. I can't come back during the Spring Festival. Can't you inspect the northeast? Ah! Dongqing Wudi suddenly came to his senses. He giggled and nodded. Yes, you're right. It's settled. I'll inspect your place during the Spring Festival. Bai Qingqian snorted softly, drank the porridge, and asked casually, after the election, your part-time job should be removed, right? Yes. Dongqing Wudi nodded and said, it's not necessarily after the election. It could be before. He was the executive minister of the army headquarters, and his part-time job was the commander of the Border Control Corps. In the entire army headquarters, the Border Control Corps occupied a very important corps position. The commander's rank of marshal was enough to show the importance that Jianghu state attached to the Border Control Corps. After Di Jiang resigned, Dongqing Wudi had been holding this position for more than 2 years, which was a miracle. Before and after the election, Dongqing Wudi had to step down from this position. The academics, the Southeast Group, and the Prince Group were all reluctant to let Dongqing Wudi continue to hold this position. Dongqing Wudi's prestige was too high, especially in the Border Control Corps. He had been the commander for more than 20 years, and he was the soul and core of hundreds of thousands of troops in the Border Control Corps. Although he was now the commander, as long as he was still in the Border Control Corps, even if he was just a soldier as long as he was there would be no room for others to intervene in the Border Control Corps. Other groups would rather let a person from the giant group take control of the Border Control Corps than see Dongqing Wudi continue to occupy this position. Especially the Southeast Group. This position was originally traded from the Dongqing clan with great difficulty, and finally given away. The grievance and helplessness were indescribable. Naturally, they wanted to regain some of the right to speak in the Border Control Corps. This position had now become an important bargaining chip for the giant group to trade with all parties in the election, and the benefits that could be traded had even exceeded expectations. What about the successor? Bai Qingqian whispered. Is it the Eagle King of the Li family? Or Thunder God? This issue was also the focus of many people's attention, and it could be said to be the most sensitive focus before and after the election. Dongqing Wudi took a deep breath and frowned. After a while he shook his head and said, "It's hard to say now. The Eagle King has enough qualifications, but some people are talking about his lack of experience in leading troops for so many years. Thunder God's qualifications are a little worse, and he's not even a general. In short, there are obstacles in front of both of them. In this respect, although we cooperate with the Southeast also has its own opinion. At the end of the day, they're not really against the Eagle King or Thunder God. Either of them is fine. What they want is some other positions in the Border Control Corps after the two of them go up. So we can push any one of them up now, and then it's nothing more than a deal. The reason why we haven't issued this appointment now is that we haven't reached a new balance. To be honest, we can give up some positions, but we don't want to give too many. The current situation is very simple. Whether it's the Eagle King or Thunder God, we have to give up at least a third of the Border Control Corps. We even have to give up nearly half of the right to speak. The price is too high. Moreover, the Border Control Corps has a special status and duties. Such a deal is not a good thing for the Corps." Bai Qingqian blinked her eyes and whispered, "So what you said to Big Brother is true?" Dongqing Wudi was stunned for a moment before he remembered what he had said to Bai Qingzhao before. He hesitated and nodded, saying, "I've also communicated with the two old masters about this matter, but no decision has been made yet." Dongqing Wudi paused and said thoughtfully, "Now the most important thing is the result of the final battle in Beihai. If Tianlan's performance is strong enough, the Border Control Corps will have the perfect candidate." The Border Control Corps was too big. In a sense, it could almost be said to be the most important large-scale integrated army in Jianghu state. It was the only one. For such a behemoth, there were all kinds of problems with the Eagle King or Thunder God. Emperor Dong's palace was extremely powerful now, so such problems could not be an obstacle. But if they wanted to achieve their goal, the giant group also needed to pay some price. Under such circumstances, the most correct approach for the giant group was to bypass the Eagle King and Thunder God and directly push forward a person who was perfect and strong in all aspects. He was so strong that once the giant group pushed forward this candidate, no one could find a reason to object. As long as he was pushed forward, everyone would take it for granted that he was the new commander of the Border Control Corps. He was the most suitable and even irreplaceable. Such a person was hard to find. The most suitable meant that there was only one. Compared with the major groups in Jianghu state, there was only one such person. It was hard to find. But it didn't mean that the giant group didn't have one. Dongqing Wudi had always had such a trump card in his hand, but he had been hesitating whether to play it or not. When this card was played, no one would object, and no one was qualified to object. It also meant that in the transfer of the supreme power of the Border Control Corps, the price that the giant group had to pay to other groups was much smaller. But if this card was played, the giant group might also lose another trump card, which would also bring some trouble. So Dongqing Wudi needed some new situations. The situation formed after the final battle in Beihai was undoubtedly a good entry point. But the premise was that the situation after the final battle was in line with expectations. Tianlon. Bai Qingqian's eyes were a little worried. Someone outside has already called him His Majesty. Is he really invincible? Is he really as rumored? The final battle in Beihai was the key point and the beginning of the Emperor Dong's palace. Li Tianlon was bound to be involved in it. This was a step he had to take. Bai Qingqian couldn't stop it, and she didn't want to, but she had never let go of the worry in her heart. It was said that there were several invincible realm experts involved in the final battle, and none of them would be on the side of Beihai. Li Tianlon hadn't entered the invincible realm yet. Don't worry. Dongqing Wudi was silent for a while and said with a smile, Tianlon has grown to this point. The worst result can guarantee that he can retreat from the final battle unscathed. Bai Qingqian nodded with a heavy heart. Just as she was about to say something, a middle-aged woman who looked to be in her early 50s had already walked up quietly. Bai Qingqian looked back and was a little surprised. She whispered, Nanny Wu, what's the matter? Speaker, I was just about to cook when I saw someone standing outside. She just stood there, motionless. I asked the minister's guards, and they said that she had been standing there in the middle of the night. The guards asked her and said that she wanted to see you, but she didn't allow anyone to disturb your rest. Ah, she has been standing there for several hours. Bai Qingqian stood up in a daze and asked curiously, Who is it? I don't know. I asked her who she was, but she didn't tell me. Nanny Wu shook her head. Bai Qingqian frowned and looked at Dongqing Wudi. They got up and went downstairs at the same time and turned on the manor surveillance in the living room. In the cold morning wind, a somewhat thin figure appeared on the screen. Quiet, gentle, beautiful, and elegant. Bai Qingqian glanced at her. Her first feeling was that she didn't know her, but then she felt a little familiar. She thought for a long time, then slightly raised her eyebrows and said in surprise, Li Shi. Dongqing Wudi nodded and whispered, It seems to be true. This chapter is on the 9th. Chapter 950. Although it was a little strange that Li Shi suddenly appeared here, for Dongqing Wudi and his wife, she was not an uninvited guest with bad intentions. After the surprise, Bai Qingqian put on a coat and walked quickly to the door. At the same time, she asked Nanny Wu to make tea. Li Shi stood quietly at the door. Perhaps because it had been a long time, her body was stained with a lot of morning dew. She looked a little hazy and colder. In the dark corners around the manor, gazes fell on her, intentionally or unintentionally. They observed her every move without malice or kindness. As the third most powerful person in Jianghu State, Dongqing Wudi's guards were undoubtedly the best in Jianghu State. 8 guards in 2 shifts protected Dongqing Wudi 24 hours a day. The 8 guards were all experts at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm from the Border Control Corps. Their courage and professionalism were beyond doubt. They left the Border Control Corps and entered the shadow sect of Jianghu State. What they learned was the sword formations passed down from the Li family's Zhuanyuantai. There were about 4 or 5 people in a group, and each group was a small sword formation. The sword formation was not very aggressive, but it was unparalleled in defense. Hundreds of years ago, after the ancestor of the Li family became the god of war of Jianghu State, he once used the 30-meter mortal world domain of the Jiang family of South America, which was known as the best defense in the world, to create 2 sets of protective sword formations with slightly different functions. It became a unique skill that the bodyguards of the Hidden Dragon Sea practiced all the time. In the following hundreds of years, the successive patriarchs of the Li family and the Wang family of Beihai would fine-tune the sword formations, and the various combinations of the sword formations became more and more sophisticated. As far as the guards around Dongqing Wudi were concerned, the sword formation composed of 4 experts at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm might not be a match for an expert of the invincible realm, but an ordinary expert of the invincible realm could not break the sword formation in a short time. Li Shi also knew this nameless protective sword formation. Every god of war of Jianghu State would fine-tune the sword formation. In the past 20 years, Kunlun City was undoubtedly responsible for this work. Kunlun City was responsible for it. It was not Gu Xingyun who was in charge. In fact, in the final analysis, Gu Xingyun, who had not reached the peak of the invincible realm and was barely close to this realm, could not make any fine-tuning suggestions for this sword formation. This work had always been done by Li Shi, who had already reached the peak of the invincible realm. Li Shi naturally knew the sword formation very well. At this time, she was standing in the most convenient place for the guards to observe. Her every move was full of sincerity. So, after a short exchange, the guards hesitated and did not choose to expel her. The black car came from the depths of the manor. Mad 1, Gad 2. Li Shi's eyebrows moved slightly. Before the car came to a complete stop, Bai Qingqian had already opened the door and walked over with almost a trot. "Welcome to the Bai family, Ms. Li Shi." Bai Qingqian's smile was impeccable, gentle, but her eyes looking at Li Shi were somewhat complicated that was difficult to hide. She put another coat of her own in her hand on Li Shi, who was wearing very thin clothes, and whispered, "I should have called in advance. As long as you come, it doesn't matter how late you are." The corner of Li Shi's mouth moved. It seemed that she wanted to say something, but she couldn't say it for a while. Draped in a warm coat, her stiff body seemed to gradually warm up. She glanced over by Qingqian and looked at Dongqing Wudi, who came out of the driver's seat. Dongqing Wudi nodded with a smile and said nothing. Li Shi bowed slightly. Her movements were slow, but they became bigger and bigger. Finally, she turned from a slight bow into a deep bow. It was extremely quiet. Bai Qingqian was a little overwhelmed. She subconsciously reached out to hold Li Shi, feeling a little confused. She knew Li Shi, but she didn't know her at all. In her memory, they met very few times, when they were very young many years ago. As the most outstanding young women of that era, Xia Ji, who was by Wang Tianzong's side, Li Shi, who was by Li Guangtu's side, and Bai Qingqian, who was by Dongqing Wudi's side, each of them had their own elegance. When they met occasionally, they just nodded to each other as a greeting. She still remembered that when Dongqing Wudi was young, he once fought with Li Guangtu, and Dongqing Wudi suffered a little loss. Since then, Bai Qingqian seemed to be displeased with Li Guangtu and Li Shi. Bai Qingqian's mind was in a mess for a moment, and her memories flew farther and farther. Li Shi's somewhat hoarse and dry voice sounded. "I've thought about it for a long time," she said quietly. "Maybe you won't accept it, but in any case, I should say thank you to you. Thank you for taking care of Rushi for so many years and taking good care of her." "Thank you." Even if most of the news was blocked in Kunlun City, she could still roughly know about Dongqing Rushi's situation in a few meetings with Xianxia. After all, Dongqing Rushi was her biological daughter, and Li Shi had always kept an eye on her. The baby, who should have been the legitimate grandson of the Dongqing clan, was given to Li Honghe by Dongqing Hongguang and Dongqing Wudi. The girl, who should have been the down-and-out princess of the Li family, was given to the Dongqing clan and became the daughter of the Dongqing clan. Bai Qingqian, who just saw her son in a hurry, almost completely collapsed. The loving couple, the filial daughter-in-law, all the beautiful relationship was completely broken at that moment. Mad 1, Gad 2. Bai Qingqian and the Dongqing clan almost completely broke up, but after the initial time Bai Qingqian, who couldn't find her son, began to gradually pay attention to Dongqing Rushi. She hadn't returned to the Dongqing clan in these years, but she still showed a mother's care and love for Dongqing Rushi. Dongqing Rushi had been in a coma for 2 years. But 2 years ago, in the more than 20 years before that, she never felt that her mother Bai Qingqian didn't like her. With this alone, Li Shi could be sure of Bai Qingqian's attitude toward Dongqing Rushi over the years. Dongqing Rushi's current situation was not very good. But Li Shi couldn't not remember the kindness of raising her for so many years. Bai Qingqian's face changed slightly, and she didn't speak. "Don't get me wrong," Li Shi whispered. "I have no intention of robbing Rushi from you. She will always be your daughter. I don't mean that." Bai Qingqian waved her hand a little awkwardly, then pulled Li Shi and laughed. "It's a little cold. Come on, let's go in and talk." Li Shi was pulled into the car by Bai Qingqian. The car started slowly. Dongqing Wudi, who was driving in person, kept looking at Li Shi through the rearview mirror. He wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Bai Qingqian seemed to know what her husband was thinking. She hesitated for a moment and said softly, I heard that you saw Tianlan as soon as you woke up?" "Yes." Li Shi nodded. Bai Qingqian glanced at Dongqing Wudi, who was driving in front, and then seemed to make up her mind. She said cautiously, "What did you talk about?" As soon as she finished speaking, she opened her mouth again and said with a forced smile, "Of course, if it's something we shouldn't know. You are his parents." Li Shi whispered. There is nothing we shouldn't know. His Majesty thinks so too. Parents. This simplest and most common word seemed to shatter all the defenses in Bai Qingqian's heart in an instant. Her body was stiff in the seat, and her face was pale. Li Shi lowered her eyebrows and whispered, We talked about his and Rushi's life experiences. I told him everything I should tell him. Chapter 951. The car was moving slowly in the manor. Inside the car, there was a deathly silence that was almost frozen. Bai Qingqian looked at Li Shi's calm face in a daze and couldn't say a word for a long time. Li Tianlan's origin. This might be the only problem she worried and even feared in recent years. There was no way to describe her inner feelings. In recent years, Li Tianlan and the Dongqing clan were getting closer and closer. Bai Qingqian felt very happy, but also a little scared. She didn't know how to face the child who was gradually returning, and she didn't dare to think about how he would react after knowing his origin. Complain? Resentment? Indifference? Or something else? She thought about this question again and again. Seeing that Li Tianlan was getting closer and closer to the answer, she looked forward to the arrival of this day, and at the same time, she was afraid of this day. She knew that Li Tianlan had noticed something. Maybe it was the clues in the past years, or the undisguised preference of the Dongqing clan and the Bai clan for him that made him notice something. But Li Tianlan didn't say it, and even occasionally showed an attitude of refusing this topic. But in addition, his attitude toward the Dongqing clan had not changed. He called Dongqing Wudi minister and called her aunt. He was polite and respectful, but there was no obvious alienation. Bai Qingqian felt a little distressed, but her heart gradually settled down. She thought that Li Tianlan might not be able to accept these things for a while. She thought that the time was not ripe enough, so the truth was clearly in front of them, but both sides turned a blind eye to it. Maybe in a few years or a few more years, she would slowly tell Li Tianlan the truth in the most peaceful way. But Bai Qingqian did not expect that Li Shi would directly pierce through this layer of window paper that almost didn't exist but had great significance. Dongqing Wudi held the steering wheel tightly and smiled silently. He couldn't blame Li Shi for anything, and Li Shi had no obligation to keep it secret for them. Besides, it seemed that there was nothing to keep secret. Bai Qingqian's confused and wandering voice sounded after a while. Well, did he say anything? No. Li Shi shook her head. He knew about this a long time ago. So? Bai Qingqian's body trembled slightly. He still won't forgive us? No. Li Shi shook her head and thought about the conversation with Li Tianlan. He didn't hate you, so there was no forgiveness. He said that neither the Li family nor the Dongqing clan had done anything wrong to him. He said that the current situation was actually very good, and there was no need to deliberately explain anything. Li Shi was silent for a while and chuckled. He is His Majesty now. Perhaps he is still very young in his 20s, and perhaps in your eyes, he is still a child. But now he is indeed one of the most powerful people in the world, and even the most powerful one. He stands at the peak of personal force. With the rapid development of Emperor Dong's palace, he also has unimaginable power and wealth. Now he can almost do whatever he wants. As long as he wants, there is nothing that he can't do or get. If he had nothing when he first appeared in Huiting a few years ago, maybe we would have told him the truth, and he would have been resentful, unable to accept it and hysterical. But now he has almost everything. What he has today is given to him by the Dongqing clan and the Li family. Standing at his height, what else can he not accept? He didn't explain it, but it doesn't mean that he didn't know it. He knew it and was still willing to deal with the Dongqing clan, which shows that he has let it go. He didn't say it because he was too lazy to entangle himself in it. At the same time, he didn't want to make you feel guilty. The way things are now is actually very good. He doesn't call you mom and dad for now, but that doesn't mean he's not their son. Li Shi suddenly thought of something and asked, Do you know why he went to Kunlun City to bring me back? Why? Dongqing Wudi asked subconsciously. Not because I might recover my strength. Li Shi said slowly. It was my own choice to join Emperor Dong's palace. He promised to help me fight with Gu Xingyun just because he said that I was also his mother. Li Shi was silent for a while and smiled with some complexity. Mother-in-law is also a mother, right? So, thank you very much. Thank you for helping me take care of Rushi for so many years. Later, I learned that the Dongqing clan did a lot of things secretly after the collapse of the Li family. If you hadn't secretly taken action, the Li family's fate might have been worse. If you hadn't, Rushi would probably not have survived. If... Her voice gradually lowered, and she was lost in thought. More than 20 years ago, the Dongqing clan was also the most influential wealthy family in Jianghu state. At that time, Dongqing Hongguang was still the standing deputy minister of the army headquarters of Jianghu state, and one of the directors of the Jianghu state parliament. Although there was an extra word, there was no standing minister in Jianghu state at that time. So Dongqing Hongguang's position at that time was equivalent to Dongqing Wudi's current position. He ranked third among the directors of the parliament, deeply rooted and powerful. The collapse of the Li family was too sudden. The southeast group was in turmoil, and the Gu family struggled to rise under great pressure. The Dongqing clan took action and easily smoothed out some things secretly and concealed some truths. For example, Dongqing Rushi and Li Tianlan. For so many years, Gu Xingyun didn't even know about it. He always thought that Li Shi and Li Guangtu's daughter was dead. Maybe he was not sure about Li Tianlan's origin until now. If there was no Dongqing clan, things would not be like this at all. Even the one Li she killed might really be Dongqing Rushi. How could there be the current story? Don't think that they are good people. They are also selfish. Bai Qingqian said coldly and gave Dongqing Wudi a hard look. Although the relationship between husband and wife had been eased, when it came to this topic, her inner resentment and grievance suddenly surged up. She found Dongqing Wudi unpleasant no matter how she looked at him. Dongqing Wudi coughed and drove the car. Because of his guilty conscience, the car was as slow as a turtle crawling. In the final analysis, what happened that year was actually a transaction, purely without any other purpose. The development of the Dongqing clan had already reached a bottleneck, or the peak that they could reach. After the peak, it was bound to be a stage of continuous decline. It could be said that Dongqing Hongguang had put in a lot of effort to become the de facto leader of the army headquarters. But the giant group was different from other groups. It was a loose group that tended to be an alliance. Its internal cohesion was seriously insufficient. Many times, before it did anything to the outside world, it had already felt the internal constraints. The giant group was naturally dominated by the wealthy families of Jianghu state. The Dongqing, Bai, and Zhou families were the pillars. But other wealthy families had various relationships with other groups. In terms of scale, the giant group was the first among the 6 groups, but it almost never made the same voice. Dongqing Hongguang was not sure how far the Dongqing clan would develop after his retirement. At that time, the 3 pillars of the giant group were urgently seeking changes, but they could not find any opportunities at all. The biggest problem was that there were no real experts in the Dongqing clan, the first wealthy family in the military. At that time, the peak force of Jianghu state was also the peak force of the dark world. It had been so for hundreds of years. The Li family and the Wang family of Beihai had always been the peak force of individual forces in Jianghu state. Even if the Dongqing clan had cultivated a great force like Jade Pool, it could not guarantee that there would be an invincible realm expert in every generation. Even if someone was lucky enough to enter the invincible realm, he was still a little brother in front of the Li family and Beihai. Individual force often did not mean anything, but more often than not, it clearly represented something. The position of the state-protecting war god could already explain some problems. This position represented great power, but at the same time, it also represented extreme martial strength. Absolute personal strength represented absolute prestige. Today's Wang family of Beihai was a behemoth that slowly transformed into shape after the personal strength reached its peak. A real peak invincible realm expert meant strength in countless disputes. Confidence was related to a lot of invisible prestige, interests, diplomatic relations, and execution power. If the Dongqing clan had an invincible realm expert who could compete with the Li family and Beihai, the entire Dongqing clan and even the giant group would go further and become a super large group that could really be on an equal footing with the southeast group. The collapse of the Li family gave the Dongqing clan an opportunity. Li Honghe needed to preserve the last strength of the Li family as another trump card. And the Dongqing clan was eager to seize this opportunity to cultivate a real top expert. Jade Pool could not cultivate such an expert. The Li family was the most suitable candidate. So the deal was reached the moment the two sides met. The grandson of the Dongqing clan became the grandson of Li Honghe and became Li Tianlan. The granddaughter of the Li family became the granddaughter of the Dongqing clan and became Dongqing Rushi. In order to integrate in the future, the two sides use the oldest but often the most effective way: marriage. From that moment on, the baby boy and the baby boy, who were born on the same day in the same year, month and year, had been tied up. Li Honghe had no reservations about Li Tianlan. He taught him all the inheritance of the Li family and tried his best to cultivate him. The Dongqing clan was also generous to Dongqing Rushi. Both sides regarded the two children as their own, waiting for them to grow up and get married smoothly. At that time, the power of the Li family would become the power of the Dongqing clan. And the power of the Dongqing clan would also be the cornerstone of the Li family's rise again. From that moment on, the Dongqing clan and the Li family had put their futures on the two children. This was a deal. Up to now, this deal had deviated a little because of various factors, but in general, the general direction had not changed. The Li family rose again. With the rise of the Li family and the establishment of Emperor Dong's palace, the new group would also become an important turning point for the three pillars of the giant group to seek change. Among them Bai Qingqian, who had lost her son, and Li Tianlan, who had suffered a lot since childhood, might have suffered a lot. Li Tianlan had gained something. What about Bai Qingqian? Li Shi looked at Bai Qingqian in a daze. After a long time she reached out, held her hand and whispered, "Thank you." Bai Qingqian shook her head. "I don't need to thank you. After all, in my heart, Rushi is also my daughter." She looked straight at Li Shi and said in a pleading voice, "If I really want to join Emperor Dong's palace, my only request is that you can help me take care of my son." Just like what he said. Li Shi said softly, "He is also my son." A son-in-law was naturally a son. Bai Qingqian bit her lip and nodded hard. "If I can, I really want to wait for Moon God to wake up, and then watch them get married and watch their children." Li Shi's voice was a little faint. "Moon God?" Bai Qingqian asked. "Ah." Li Shi smiled. "This is the name that Li Guangtu and I gave her before she was born, Li Yueshan, but the name Rushi is also very good." Name. Bai Qingqian's eyes were in a trance. "Tianlan also has a name, right?" Li Shi asked tentatively. Almost every parent would choose a name for their child before they were born. "Yes." Li Shi smiled bitterly. She and Dongqing Wudi naturally gave Li Tianlan a name, but things had developed to this point. That name was almost meaningless. Li Tianlan was Li Tianlan after all. Dongqing Wudi sighed, and his eyes flickered. No one knew what he was thinking. After a long time, he stopped the car and whispered, "We also gave him a name at that time." At that time, Qingqian was just 4 months pregnant. Shaking his head, Dongqing Wudi said, "His name is Dongqing Huangtu." Chapter 952. Li Shi left quietly and did not bring any extra trouble when she came back. At 11 o'clock in the morning, Li Shi, who had disappeared for a night, came back again. Li Qingqing, who looked obviously restless, suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. Li Tianlan, who was accompanying Li Qingqing rather than Li Qingqing, stood up. He asked, "Are you all right?" "Yes." Li Shi glanced at him with soft eyes. "Thank you." Li Tianlan looked up at his watch and shook his head. "The route has been determined. We will return to Tiannan at 2:30 p.m. Tomorrow, Emperor Dong's palace will officially announce to the public that we will welcome the third deputy palace lord of Emperor Dong's palace." Li Shi was silent for a while and nodded slightly. "Okay. Your Majesty." Li Tianlan turned his head and glanced at Lin Yuxian, who was sitting next to Li Qingqing. Lin Yuxian noticed his gaze but ignored it. Obviously, he didn't want to leave. This attitude made Li Tianlan angry. He was not familiar with Li Shi, let alone Li Qingqing. But if he left now, Lin Yuxian would definitely be full of complaints. Compared with Li Tianlan, he had no reason to stay here. Li Tianlan was thinking about what new topic to talk about when someone knocked on the door suddenly. The sound of high-heeled shoes on the ground came in from outside the door. Han Xinyan held the mobile phone and said with a dignified expression, "Your Majesty, my dad, a military counselor has important information to report to you." Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows slightly. Thinking of military counselor, who had done his best for Emperor Dong's palace but had always been aloof from him. His expression was a little strange. Han Xinyan subconsciously lowered her voice and said hurriedly, "It's very important information." Li Tianlan nodded, reached for the mobile phone, and glanced at Lin Yuxian again. Lin Yuxian stood up helplessly and planned to leave with Li Tianlan. Child Lin, if you have nothing to do, please stay. I still have something to communicate with you. In addition, Qingqing and I have rarely left Kunlun City in recent years, so we don't know much about the outside world, especially Shenyuan City. You can talk to us. Li Shi took the initiative to speak and looked at Lin Yuxian meaningfully. As someone who had been there, she could naturally understand Lin Yuxian's occasional look at Li Qingqing. It was not a male's desire to conquer a female, but a very simple yearning and love. Li Shi really didn't know much about Lin Yuxian, but she had known Lin Fengting many years ago after all. With Lin Fengting's character, the children educated by him might not be saints, but it was not an exaggeration to say that he was a gentleman. Lin Yuxian himself was the best choice in terms of talent, appearance and future. If Li Qingqing could be with him, it could be said that it was a pretty good ending. Cough. Okay. Lin Yuxian stammered for a moment and then reacted. He gently raised the corner of his mouth. Auntie, you can call me Xiaolin or Yuxian. It sounds kind. I'm not child Lin. I will develop in Jianghu State in the future. I hope you can give me more advice. Han Xinyan took a dull look at the former heir of the Lin clan. The corner of Li Tianlan's mouth twitched, but he didn't say anything. A real bootlicker didn't care about the situation. In the end, he would get everything he wanted. No matter what the opportunity was, he just needed to bootlick. Shaking his head, he didn't say much. He walked out of the room and dialed the military counselor's number. The military counselor picked up the call immediately. It was obvious that he was waiting on the other side of the phone. What's the matter? Li Tianlan asked directly. Your Majesty, have you seen today's news? Li Tianlan was a little confused. It's the morning news of Beijiang. Military counselor said in a dignified tone. The Beijiang Corps has begun to count the list of the families of the war dead last night. In the morning, the first batch of pensions has been issued in full. So fast. Li Tianlan was shocked. This speed could no longer be described as efficiency. With so many families of the victims, it was impossible to complete the statistics in a short period of time. Obviously, the so-called overnight statistics last night was just a pretense. The northern borderline had already begun to secretly count the families of the war dead to determine their true identities. How much is the first batch of pensions? 120 billion. Military counselor said in a deep voice. There are several more batches later. Li Tianlan frowned tightly. 120 billion. It's hard for the finance of Beijiang to come up with this money. It's not very difficult. Military counselor's tone was very certain. We also have investments in Beijiang. Although the scale is not large, it is only relatively speaking. I can be sure that the amount of cash that Beijiang's finance department can mobilize overnight is not 120 billion. Not even half. This sum of money seems to have appeared out of thin air. The most important thing is that Beijiang has made a statement that the second batch of pensions of about 150 billion will be issued tomorrow, and there will be another batch the day after tomorrow. They don't seem to have considered the problem of funds at all. Are you kidding me? Li Tianlan laughed. Funds come out of nowhere? Military counselor was silent for a long time before he whispered. Your Majesty, have you ever thought that in the eyes of others, our funds often come out of nowhere? Li Tianlan's eyes narrowed slightly, and he said flatly, What do you mean? I have begun to investigate the source of the accounts in Beijiang, but there is not too much detailed information at present. However, according to the surface situation, the funds in Beijiang have nothing to do with foreign consortiums. Although some of the money does come from overseas, this money is not from foreign consortiums, but the Jiang family's own property. Your Majesty, we also have many industries overseas. This model is too similar. Military counselor was silent for a long time before he said in a low voice, I suspect that there is also a consortium similar to the Flourishing Age Fund behind the Jiang family, which is led by the Jiang family itself. In terms of scale, they may not be as large as the Flourishing Age Fund, but it is enough for them to pay this high pension. The hidden financial resources of the Jiang family should be extremely strong. Their overall strength is not as simple as we think. Li Tianlan rubbed his forehead with one hand and said slowly, It makes sense, but there is not much basis for your speculation. There is one more thing. Saint hesitated, took a deep breath and said softly, Before the boss left last night, he asked me to remind you that you must be careful of Jianghu. The boss seems to have received reliable news that the Jiang family seems to have a super expert in a special state. His state is probably similar to yours, but not exactly the same. His combat capability should be beyond the peak of the invincible realm. At present, some indications show that this person may be Jianghu, and even the decisive battle in Beihai is behind him. Li Tianlan was obviously stunned for a while. Jianghu? He muttered to himself and thought of Jianghu he saw yesterday. Then he shook his head and said with certainty, "He is not. Even if he is not, he must have a very close relationship with Jianghu." Military counselor said, "Your Majesty, in the next decisive battle in Beihai, he is very likely to be your opponent, and the boss asked me to remind you. Have you not paid attention to Li Guangtu's state for a long time?" Li Tianlan fell silent. After a long while, he took a light breath and said flatly, "When I go back, I will go to the headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven capital to have a look." Chapter 953. After hanging up the call with military counselor, Li Tianlan stood where he was and kept silent for a long time. The military advisor's reminder was very timely and straightforward. Although what he said was just speculation and suspicion, the slight hesitation in his tone had an obvious sense of certainty. Military counselor almost said that there must be a super superior in the Jiang family, who was in a similar state but not exactly the same as him. If it wasn't Jianghu, then it must have a very close relationship with Jianghu. It was he who integrated the power of the sanctuary, the Jiang family of South America, East Island, and Jiu. It might be an exaggeration to say integration, but the alliance between several superpowers was indeed a bit inexplicable. It was understandable that East Island went all out. Because of the Shadow Throne, the sanctuary also had a reason to intervene, but the Jiang family of South America was really messing around. As for Jiu, he had now died in Li Tianlan's hands, so there was no need to think about it. All the signs showed that there should be a key figure among these superpowers. A key figure who was extremely mysterious but had the absolute strength to suppress the superpowers. This key figure promoted the final battle of Beihai, so he was bound to have a connection with Zhongzhou state. At least, he had a connection with Wang Qinglei and Chen Fangqing. After all, Jiang Shan was a senior counselor in Zhongzhou state. The Jiang family had enough secret channels to contact Wang Qinglei and Chen Fangqing. If the mysterious super superior really existed, he undoubtedly had the power to deter and unite several superpowers. All the signs showed that the Jiang family was behind the scenes, which united the superpowers in Zhongzhou state and promoted the final battle of Beihai. Li Tianlan thought of Jianghu's palm in front of him again. "Do you want to be my friend or my enemy?" That sentence was calm and cautious, but with a kind of confidence that could make him feel an obvious sense of oppression. Did Jianghu's confidence come from the superior hiding in the dark? If things were really like military counselor's speculation, it meant that under everyone's eyes, the Jiang family had completed the integration of its own power. East Island, Knights Templars, and the Jiang family of South America might not be the subordinates of the Jiang family, but at least they were forces that could be used. It was a combination of interests that could not be broken in a short time. Jiang Shan was controlling Beijiang in a very high-profile way. Jiang Shangyu, who acted inexplicably but behaved extremely strongly, appeared in Yuzhou. The final battle of Beihai was getting closer and closer. Everything showed that the hidden superior of the Jiang family was ready to come out in a high-profile way. This also meant that the other party had the confidence to strengthen himself. Was his goal the new situation after the decisive battle in North Sea? What would he gain from the new situation? Beihai, Beijiang, Kunlun City. Li Tianlan rubbed his forehead, his thoughts a little chaotic. It was not until this moment that he realized that the super forces of the dark world had once faced it was the feeling he had in the Samsara Palace. An enemy who was always hiding in the dark but had great strength, and an enemy who was unpredictable was enough to give anyone a headache. "Your Majesty, have you seen the news?" Footsteps came from the corner, and Saint walked over. "Yes," Li Tianlan said, "I didn't see it, but I heard that Jianghu." He shook his head and didn't continue. Saint was silent for a moment, and then said with a self-mocking smile, "Now I understand what Jianghu meant. He said that the Jiang family has no so-called backer. If they really have one, then their backer is only themselves." When did such a person appear in the Jiang family? Li Tianlan was a little confused. If this expert really exists, then who is the most likely one? No. Saint shook his head without hesitation. There is no such person. We've searched through the genealogy of the Jiang family. The most likely one is Xianxia, and only Xianxia. Except for him, there will not be a second person in the Jiang family who has this kind of strength to suppress Knights Templars, East Island, and the Jiang family of South America. Even if his combat capability is not as good as your Majesty's, he is at least at the peak of the invincible realm. Xianxia can't do it. Li Tianlan said blandly, I can't break through the invincible realm, and neither can he. It's not because of talent, but because of his body, or in other words, he's not old enough. So we think his state should be similar to that of your Majesty, but not exactly the same. Saint said, it's also impossible for him to directly become a half-step invincible realm expert overnight. No one can break through the realm so easily, but there is a way to achieve a similar effect. Go on. Li Tianlan was expressionless. It's not breaking the realm. Saint said simply, it's recovery. If we assume that Xianxia has been in a state of serious injury, he originally had the strength beyond the peak of the invincible realm, but because of the serious injury, he could only perform at the level of the thunder-shocking realm. If part of his injury recovers for some reason, then his combat capability can naturally advance by leaps and bounds, and he can step into the half-step invincible realm. And in these years, if his injury recovers again, he can perform the strength of the peak of the invincible realm or even higher. This is not impossible. And we can be sure that Xianxia has been in poor health since he was a child. If he is seriously injured, all this can be explained. How? Li Tianlan asked in reply. Do you want to say that Xianxia was born to be at the peak of the invincible realm? Saint paused, opened his mouth, and couldn't say anything for a moment. He hesitated for a long time and then said softly, Your Majesty, now is not the time to investigate the reason. The fact is in front of us. The Jiang family can almost be sure that there is a super expert, so I'll go to Beihai with you this time. At least, I can help you share some of the pressure. No need. Li Tianlan insisted a little stubbornly. You go to East Island. I can handle Beihai. What if Li Guangtu goes with you? Saint's question was extremely sharp. Li Tianlan subconsciously narrowed his eyes. No one knew what he was thinking. After a while he continued, I can handle it. Saint looked into Li Tianlan's eyes and suddenly said, Your Majesty, you haven't really entered the invincible realm. Li Tianlan glanced at him and didn't say anything. I've never understood. Saint continued, if you don't enter the invincible realm, no matter how powerful you are, there should be a limit. But Your Majesty, your combat capability has almost exceeded all limits. The only explanation is that your sword intent is perfect, and it should have really reached the supreme height. But sword intent can't replace everything. The most realistic point is that at your current age, under normal circumstances, you can only support the power of the thunder-shocking realm. At most you can only have the combat capability of the invincible realm. Li Tianlan gave a nonchalant and made no comment. But your actual combat capability now has steadily surpassed the peak of the invincible realm. This is not the power that your physical quality can bear, and you shouldn't be able to exert the sword energy that can match this power and the perfect sword intent. So, Saint looked at Li Tianlan deeply, there must be a reason. Li Tianlan didn't say anything. I've thought about it for a long time. If I'm right, the reason why you can be truly invincible now is not because of your physical quality, right? Your real combat capability should still be the combat capability of the invincible realm. But in the real outbreak state, you can cause damage that is infinitely close to that of the chosen one in an instant or in a short time. Such an outbreak has a price. Your body didn't collapse, so the only explanation is, in that state, every time you attack, every sword, it consumes your vitality. Saint's tone was low. Is it your own lifespan? This should be your biggest secret now, right? Li Tianlan suddenly fell silent. I have to go to Beihai. Saint said in a deep voice, even if I can't do too much, I can't watch you being besieged by the expert of the Jiang family and Li Guangtu. Their strength is not much different from yours in the extreme state. Who said I would be besieged? Li Tianlan said blandly. Saint looked at Li Tianlan in astonishment. Li Tianlong smiled and his eyes flickered. It's been more than 2 years. Do you really think that the current Beihai, or the current Wang Tianzong, has no power to fight back at all? Chapter 954. At that moment, it was as if he had suddenly heard a huge nightmare or a disaster. Saint's body suddenly trembled. He looked straight at Li Tianlong and said in a hoarse voice, Wang Tianzong. He was destined to be a figure that would not be forgotten in a short time. But he was also a figure that was rarely mentioned in the past 2 years. He was invincible in the world. He shocked the world and was supreme. The peak of the Wang family of Beihai and Wang Tianzong's personal glory were so short. At the moment when he was really supreme, the eternal sword above Mormons directly ended everything. That was the real day of the end. It had only been less than 2 years since the chaos in Mormons, but when it was mentioned at this time, it seemed to be really a thing of the last era. Saint's heart was in turmoil, and he couldn't calm down at all. Although he didn't want to admit it, he had to admit that Wang Tianzong, who appeared in Mormons that day, was enough to be a nightmare for most people in the dark world, including Lin Fengting, Li Guangtu, and naturally Saint. He was now in the invincible realm and was a top expert in the dark world. But compared with Wang Tianzong at that time, he was really insignificant. That was the Real Supreme, the peak of the dark world for hundreds of years or even longer. He was brilliant and invincible. Perhaps except for Li Tianlong, no one could treat Wang Tianzong equally in that state. What was Wang Tianzong's current state? After more than 2 years of silence, did he recover some strength so quickly? It was like a shadow that once existed had once again covered the sky. Saint's heart was a little cold, and even his tone became a little cold. It can't be so fast. It's absolutely impossible. Why are you excited? Li Tianlong glanced at him. Saint opened his mouth and didn't know what to say to express his emotions. After a long time, he said with a bitter smile, Your Majesty, why do you think that the Sword Emperor has recovered? He hasn't fully recovered yet, but he's still a supreme genius after all. After such a long time, it's impossible for him to not have any tricks up his sleeves and allow himself to be trampled on. Li Tianlong shook his head and said, The Wang family of Beihai is too confident. I can't tell what I feel. In the game between Beihai and Jianghu state, at the beginning, Beihai could be said to have made concessions step by step. But I don't know when it started. There is no specific time, but the whole of Beihai suddenly became tough. For example, Wang Xianxiao's speech to the whole of Beihai and the large-scale conscription of the Beihai Corps. It was precisely because this attitude was beyond Chen Fengqing's expectations that he felt that many things were out of his control. That was why his actions became more and more radical, and in the end, he pushed forward the termination plan. All of this seems to have been deliberately guided. If I'm not mistaken, Wang Tianzong's state has changed before and after that speech. I don't know what the specific changes are, but at that realm, his recovery ability may not be much worse than his combat capability. You reminded me to pay attention to Li Guangtu's condition. Li Guangtu might get better. Why can't Wang Tianzong do the same? It's not the same thing. Saint smiled bitterly and said, Li Guangtu's injury is far less serious than Wang Tianzong's. We all know the power of that sword. Wang Tianzong is lucky not to die. In our estimation, the most optimistic result is that Wang Tianzong can't recover within 10 years. It's only been 2 years, so it should be impossible. Li Tianlong shook his head slightly and said nothing. What he said just now was all speculation, but what really made him sure that Wang Tianzong's state was gradually recovering was actually the information about Carefree that Lin Yuxian told him. Carefree might be able to suppress Ruthless in a certain state, but when no one in the whole of Beihai could be sure of his current state, why did Wang Xianxia dare to attack Ruthless? Because of Carefree? But in this case, it looked like a big gamble. The Wang family of Beihai was indeed crazy, but at this stage, they couldn't afford to gamble at all. So the only answer was that the Wang family of Beihai didn't care about his state. Even if his current state could suppress and devour Ruthless Carefree, the Wang family of Beihai wouldn't care. The only reason that could make Wang Xianxiao so confident, apart from the so-called compensation, was Wang Tianzong. I have a hunch. Li Tianlong chuckled. The final battle in Beihai this time will definitely give everyone a huge surprise. If that's the case, Saint hesitated for a moment. If that's the case, it's most appropriate for me to go by myself. Li Tianlong said blandly, At the very least, even if it's impossible, I can at least guarantee that I can escape unscathed. Even if Wang Tianzong has recovered a little, as long as he's not at his peak, there's nothing to worry about. The mysterious expert of the Jiang family, Li Kuang too. Several invincible realm experts. It sounds scary, but at the very least, even if I can't beat them, no one can stop me if I want to leave. If you guys go, maybe it'll be a different situation. Let's go back to Tiannan today. I'll call Du Hanin and Su Chu who are in Beihai to come back. Emperor Dong's palace will concentrate all its forces to East Island, and I'll go to Beihai by myself. This is the safest way. The corner of Saint's mouth twitched, and he said with a helpless and bitter smile, "Safe, okay, safe." He hesitated for a moment and said in a low voice, "But your current state? Your guess is right. If I want to maintain the extreme state now, what I squander is indeed vitality. My physical strength is currently unable to bear the absolute power and sword energy, so I can only overdraw. From this point of view, before I make a sword move in the extreme state, I first hurt my body, so I need a lot of vitality to make up for the injury. It's not wrong to say that I overdraw my life." Li Tianlan's voice was very calm. "But in fact, the impact on me is not as serious as you think. The huge vitality of the dragon vein of Zhongzhou state may not be able to completely support my unscrupulous waste. But don't forget, compared with the martial arts direction of the Wang family of Beihai's extreme outbreak, what's the best thing about the Li family's martial arts? The Li family's strongest thing was the sword. The Wang family of Beihai's strongest thing was also the sword. The strongest thing of the two was the sword, but the direction was not the same. The martial arts direction of Beihai was extreme outbreak. And the Li family? It's extreme balance." Li Tianlan said calmly, "So at present, I can maintain this state. There will be an impact, but it won't be very big. Maybe I sleep longer, eat more, and need more rest and adequate nutrition. As for the follow-up impact, it will probably be reflected in a few decades. But after a few decades, my physical strength will be enough to support me to enter a higher realm, so all these problems are not very big." "But," Saint hesitated for a moment and used honorifics again, "you don't have the body of the invincible realm yet. No matter how balanced you are, it should be difficult to control the power beyond the peak of the invincible realm." "You're wrong." Li Tianlan's tone was normal. "At least so far, the power I have exerted has not surpassed the peak of the invincible realm." Chapter 955. There was a dim light in the underground base, which was so simple that it could even be said to have been picked up by others. On the surface, it was a barren mountain forest at the border of southern cloud and southern sky. The underground base was built in a hurry. In order to hide it, it was dug very deep, so the ventilation was not very good. The air was stuffy, with a hint of a faintly discernible stench. There were no extra staff. One of them used to be a gatekeeper of the base after retiring from scientific research, and the other was an apprentice of the gatekeeper. In addition to the master and apprentice, there was only a set of outdated life support equipment left in the base. "What is this?" Jianghu looked at the extremely old equipment in front of him with a look of disgust. His Majesty's eyes were also full of disgust, which was exactly the same as Jianghu's. But his expression was a little helpless. "I'll make do with it. I hate the feeling of becoming a fool." Jianghu complained and said with a little pain in the ass, "I feel sick when I think about it." His Majesty did not speak. He thought that even if he became a fool, it would happen after he came out of this set of equipment. "What are you thinking about?" Jianghu looked at him and raised his eyebrows. "Don't you know what I'm thinking?" His Majesty asked in reply, and turned on the life support equipment in front of him. The equipment was a little outdated. It looked old and even a little dirty, but the inside was very clean. His Majesty pressed the button, and the sound of the equipment running rang out. The small cabin in front of them began to be filled with a black liquid. The liquid was increasing, and it looked like a piece of almost solidified darkness. His Majesty suddenly retched, turned to look at Jianghu, and said helplessly, "What are you doing?" "Cut the crap." Jianghu resisted the desire to vomit, and his face was stiff. "It's really nonsense," His Majesty murmured to himself. The distance between them was too close. When they stood together, not only did they know what each other was thinking, but they even felt the same. "But if you don't talk, Doesn't it look strange? Xianxia snorted, and his face became more and more ugly. Your willpower is too poor. This degree of sleep will make people uncomfortable, but it's nothing. And this time, it won't be long. Cut the crap. Xianxia glared at His Majesty and said angrily, You do it if you can. His Majesty nodded seriously and repeated, If you can do it, then go ahead. Xianxia paused. After a while he gritted his teeth and said, Now I want to kill you. If you can do it, then go ahead. Of course, His Majesty could sleep at this level. But then he had to fight Li Tianlan alone. Xianxia really couldn't do this kind of thing. There has been some progress in the laboratory. We will strive to develop the second generation of nutrient solution so that it won't be as disgusting as it is now. His Majesty said slowly, As for this base, it's really a little shabby, but we don't have much power here, so we can only make do. 3 days later, after the battle between me and Li Tianlan is over, you will be transferred to East Island as soon as possible. His Majesty was silent for a moment and said softly, If there are no accidents, after the battle at the North Sea, it won't matter much whether or not we have new nutrient fluids. Xianxia looked at the thicker and thicker black liquid in the cockpit and took a deep breath subconsciously. The development of the Jiang family in this respect was completely different from that of the Wang family of Beihai. They couldn't be compared at all. Whether it was the foundation or the technology, they weren't at the same level. So naturally, the things they developed couldn't be perfect. This black nutrient solution could be said to be one of the most important things of the Jiang family now, codenamed Eternal Seal. This liquid, which was almost in a solid state, was the product of the Jiang family's targeted research for many years. It was also a drug specially developed for Xianxia and His Majesty. When Xianxia was dormant in the cabin, under the penetration of the Eternal Seal, the sensitivity of his body would be greatly reduced, forming a state similar to that of a vegetative person. The perfect combination of various drugs greatly strengthened his body when it was extremely slow. He and His Majesty were the same person. This kind of phenomenon that science couldn't explain would naturally have some facts that science couldn't explain. For example, the two people's thoughts could be synchronized within a certain distance. Another example was that within a certain distance, His Majesty could transfer a lot of the damage he suffered to Xianxia, who was temporarily sealed. In the same way, when Xianxia was asleep, his physical strength was greatly improved. His Majesty could also overdraft his body to suppress the toxins in his body, so as to exert the power close to the peak state. He and Xianxia were the same person. But from this point of view, it was equivalent to two individuals. His Majesty didn't know the result of the battle between him and Li Tianlan. But as long as Xianxia was asleep, he was invincible. After all, Xianxia had no poison in his body. Without poison, in the nutrient solution codenamed Eternal Seal, his physical strength was completely comparable to that of the peak of the invincible realm. In addition, with His Majesty's own physical strength, the two could bear his strength and the damage at the same time. It could almost easily break through the boundary of the peak of the invincible realm. This thing is so beautiful. His Majesty looked at the black liquid in the cockpit with some disgust, and his tone was a little emotional. After countless experiments and countless improvements, this was already the best result he could get. The only drawback was that Xianxia's body and mind would also be in an extremely slow state for a short period of time after he ended his sleep. His external performance was like an idiot. But in the state of sleep, the Eternal Seal could directly improve a person's physical endurance from the half-step invincible realm to the peak of the invincible realm. It was definitely a well-deserved masterpiece. This kind of masterpiece couldn't play any role in the hands of others, but in the hands of Xianxia and His Majesty, it was a real divine weapon. It was no exaggeration to say that before the poison of vermilion bird blood and black tortoise blood was solved, how powerful His Majesty could exert completely depended on the physical strength of Xianxia in the state of sleep. The laboratory of the Jiang family had never given up the study of the Eternal Seal. At present, there had been some results. The expected result of the second generation of the Eternal Seal was that the physical strength of Xianxia in the state of sleep could break through the peak of the invincible realm. If this idea could succeed, His Majesty would exert the real combat capability at the peak state. I didn't imagine it, Xianxia said directly. This sentence was a bit brainless. But at this moment, he completely felt the problem in His Majesty's heart. Just like many years ago, no one could imagine what the dark world would be without the Li family. Now the two of them had never imagined what the dark world would be without Dongqing Huangtu/Li Tianlan. That kind of dark world. His Majesty was silent for a long time before he whispered. That may not be what we want, but we can all be sure that we can get what we want in that kind of dark world. Xianxia nodded and said, That's enough. There was a dull roar in the cockpit. All the equipment was started. Xianxia turned to look at His Majesty and reached out his palm. Goodbye. Goodbye. His Majesty held his hand and said, Go to sleep. When you wake up and meet again, we will be His Majesty in the dark world. Chapter 956. More than 2 years ago, or in the past many years, when Sword Emperor Wang Tianzong of Jianghu State was healthy, every time he came to Yuzhou, as long as the itinerary was clear, a director would come to pick him up. There was no accident. Every time Wang Tianzong was picked up, it was the director of the Southeast Group. Only once, the president came in person, but it was still the director of the Southeast Group who came with the president. A long time ago, when Li Baidian gossiped with him about this, he sighed with emotion and said that this was the F*King card. Li Tianlan didn't quite understand it at that time. He just felt that it was meaningless to do so. It seemed to be useless except for showing off. It had been a few years since that conversation. Now Li Tianlan, who also had the same treatment, also understood the meaning of doing so. This was the second time he left Yuzhou since he was called His Majesty. The last time he returned to Shenyuan City, it was Zhou Mulin, the director of the giant group, who sent him off. This time, it was Dongqing Wudi who sent him back to Shenyuan City. This was also a small detail that Zhongzhou State and Emperor Dong's palace jointly maintained the stability of Zhongzhou State. Although such a farewell was of high standard, it would not be reported by the news, but people who should know would know. This meant that Emperor Dong's palace and the group controlled by it were still under the control of Zhongzhou State. The relationship between the two sides was still stable, and Emperor Dong's palace was also under the leadership of the parliament. It was a very simple signal, but an essential one. Gradually, Li Tianlan began to enjoy the treatment that Wang Tianzong had. In the conference room of the Hidden Dragon Sea, he could sit opposite Li Huaqing. When entering and leaving Yuzhou, the director would personally pick him up. Similarly, in the past many years, every time Wang Tianzong was in Yuzhou, countless modern superfirepower of Zhongzhou State would secretly aim at Beihai. Now, when Li Tianlan was in Yuzhou, countless weapons were also aimed at Shenyuan City. The subtlety of this was the real relationship between super forces like Emperor Dong's palace and the Wang family of Beihai and Zhongzhou State. It's good to leave today. The comrade from the Meteorological Bureau said that there will be a heavy snowstorm tonight, and it is estimated that all flights will be delayed tomorrow. Yuzhou has been very busy recently, and your identity is very sensitive now. It is not good for you to stay in Yuzhou for a long time. In the cold wind in the afternoon, the sky above Yuzhou Airport was slightly gloomy. The plane was doing the last check before takeoff. Dongqing Wudi stood in the cold wind and said in a calm tone, patting Li Tianlan's shoulder. It's not good for the parliament, is it? Li Tianlan laughed. Wang Tianzong seldom came to Yuzhou before. If there were no accidents, Li Tianlan would have fewer chances to come here in the future. It was not because it was a forbidden place, but because different identities represented different meanings. He was now Emperor Dong Huang, and the new group had already taken shape. The giant group was fully supporting Li Tianlan to let him stand at the real peak, which also meant that there were few things he could not solve. It would be fine if he came to Yuzhou in private, but if he came with great fanfare, some people would inevitably think that he had something to communicate and negotiate with the parliament in private. No matter what it was, not many people would know. In this way, the longer he stayed in Yuzhou, the more uneasy the outside world would be. They would think that there were some unsolvable conflicts between Emperor Dong's palace and the parliament that needed Li Tianlan to waste time here. Even if he came here for nothing, just like this time, he didn't meet with Li Huaqing at all. But the outside world didn't know about it. It was impossible for the parliament to issue a statement saying that he came here for nothing and told everyone not to think too much. That would be too weak. It's the same for you, Dongqing Wudi said in a low voice, and his serious expression softened a little. Your identity is different now. You represent more than yourself. You must think more about what happens in the future. Heavenly Son, His Majesty, Leader. How nice it sounds. But how could it be so easy to do? Take Wang Tianzong for example. He seemed to be well off these years, but only he knew the pressure he was under. He was probably out of breath. But he was angry, wasn't he? In fact, if they had restrained themselves over the years and restrained themselves in some things, how could there be such a situation today? The nature of Emperor Dong's palace and the Wang family of Beihai are the same. Studying them can save you a lot of detours. In your current position you can do anything you want, but there is not much you can really do. Slowly, you will understand that when a person can really be unscrupulous, that is when he really has nothing. Emperor Dong's palace and the two groups have power over the court and are as rich as a country. But behind them are the fate of countless people. I hope you can feel their real weight. To bear these you need more than force. You also need prudence. Li Tianlan slowly put out the cigarette in his hand and gently flicked his fingers. Subtle sword energy flew out of his fingers and instantly broke the cigarette into powder invisible to the naked eye. His smile faded and he nodded slightly. I'm a little long-winded. Dongqing Wudi laughed at himself and said, in short, you can rest assured about the affairs in Yuzhou. Although we are old guys, none of us is willing to admit our age. We can handle things here for you. Tianlan, my only hope is that when you stand at the top and look at the world, you must not forget the cliff under your feet because of the beautiful mountains and rivers in front of you. I did some ridiculous things in my early years. Today it seems that the result is good. Over the years, I have regretted it many times. But if I ask myself if I can do it again, even if I know I will regret it, I will do it. But I will regret it eventually. Dongqing Wudi's eyes were a little complicated. He looked at the young man in front of him quietly. Dong Huang of the Dark World. The young majesty of Jianghu State. The current leader of the Li family. The young giant who stood at the top of the world in his early 20s. His own son. Dongqing Wudi patted Li Tianlan on the shoulder heavily. It seemed that he wanted to hide the sudden panic and uneasiness in his heart. He turned his head slightly and said hoarsely, no matter what happens in the future, it's good to be safe and alive. Li Tianlan took a deep look at him. It's a little strange. After thinking for a while, he said softly. Dongqing Wudi's body stiffened. In my memory, no one seems to have said this to me. Since I was a child, Grandpa has always asked me to rush to the highest place. Li Tianlan said softly, when I got to this position, Grandpa was gone. If he was still there, maybe he should have advised me to be cautious. I like this feeling very much. I will also remember these words. In fact, there is no need to regret anything really. Since I was a child, I have thought that I have nothing to lose, so even today, I have never thought about what I have lost. What I see is what I have gained. The Li family is mine, and Emperor Dong's palace is mine. It's a little late, more than 20 years late, but now I have a father and a mother. Li Tianlan's smile was clear without any resentment or dissatisfaction. Now that I have parents, I don't want to lose you. The plane was ready to take off. Li Tianlan took a step forward and hugged Dongqing Wudi, who was a little stiff. Take care of yourself. He whispered, if I have time, I will go to Jianghu to see you. Let's go. He waved his hand and strode onto the plane. After a short wait, the plane slowly entered the runway. It started, sprinted, rushed into the sky, and went further and further away. Dongqing Wudi had been standing there and watching, just watching all the time. When he finished the 6th cup of coffee, he, who had been sitting quietly in the cafe all afternoon, ate the last piece of cake. He narrowed his eyes and saw the helicopter roaring overhead. It went over and approached the nearby majestic castle like a mountain. He watched silently, watching the helicopter descend and disappear from his sight, and finally smiled softly. Waiter! He called out calmly. Sir, what can I do for you? A young dark-skinned waiter in uniform walked over and said respectfully. I need a pen and a blank sheet of paper. He said softly. The waiter was stunned, handed him the ballpoint pen with both hands, said, wait a minute, and turned to take a blank notebook from the backstage. He said thank you, tore a blank sheet of paper from the notebook, and handed it to the waiter with a tip of 100 Jianghu dollars. He said with a smile, one sheet is enough. I'm very satisfied with your service. Without waiting for the waiter to respond, he had picked up the pen, lowered his head, and seemed to be thinking about what to write. The waiter left without a sound. The ballpoint pen in his hand began to slide on the white paper, and quickly turned into 2 simple lines of small characters. He put down the ballpoint pen, looked at the content on the paper, and shook his head slightly. I wanted to write something pretentious. My literary talent is too poor. He, who seemed to be shrouded in a starry cloud, sighed, stood up, and turned to look at the huge castle standing under the sky not far away. The sun was about to set in Xianxia city. He shook his head regretfully after making sure that he really couldn't write a mighty and domineering letter of challenge. The setting sun fell. The lights were on. At the moment when day and night alternated, he flicked his fingers casually. With a faint sound, the piece of paper in his hand that had been torn somewhat neatly disappeared in an instant. Boom! In an instant, a small half of Xianxia city heard an extremely violent thunder. On the lawn in front of the castle, Li Tianlan, who had taken the plane from Yuzhou to Nanyun, and then back to Xianxia city, suddenly looked back the moment he got off the plane. In his sight, the sky seemed to darken in an instant. The lights of Xianxia city shone and refracted in the darkness. Outside Emperor Dong's palace, a solidified domain that Li Tianlan had never seen before took shape in the blink of an eye. The violent domain swallowed all the light and turned into an exaggerated whirlpool of thousands of meters in the distant sky. The whirlpool was expanding rapidly, covering the entire Emperor Dong's palace in an instant. At this moment, everyone in Emperor Dong's palace subconsciously raised their heads and looked at the sky. As far as the eye could see, the sky had been completely distorted by the majestic domain. The space was shaking wildly. Under the absolute pressure, a white light rushed from the whirlpool to Li Tianlan unhurriedly. Li Tianlan's eyes narrowed slightly. At first glance, he saw that it was a piece of white paper. The most ordinary piece of white paper. The white paper flew all the way from thousands of meters away and accelerated wildly in the domain that distorted the sky. Like a meteor, it directly crashed into Emperor Dong's palace. Li Tianlan, who was expressionless, stretched out his hand. The meteor directly crashed into Li Tianlan's hand. It was completely silent. The domain that covered thousands of meters in the sky suddenly disappeared. Li Tianlan's arm shook. Saint and Lin Yuxian, who were beside him, were directly retreated by a huge force at the same time, and their bodies were unstable. Li Tianlan was motionless, looking down at the white paper in his hand quietly. The white paper that flew thousands of meters did not deform at all. It was neat and tidy. The handwriting on the white paper was extremely clear and straightforward. You didn't choose to be our friend. Then we are enemies. 3 days later, in Emperor Dong's palace, we will fight to the death. Li Tianlan gently rubbed the paper with his fingers, narrowed his eyes, and did not speak for a long time. Chapter 957. The raging sky quieted down without a sound. The sky was still black, but the night returned to its beauty and tranquility. The extremely fast moment just now was like an illusion that everyone had experienced. The only difference was that there was a piece of white paper in Li Tianlan's hand. Li Tianlan lowered his head and looked at it silently. This letter of challenge was not formal, and the wording was very casual, but the way it was delivered was shocking. Only a true expert would be able to determine how terrifying that moment was. Your Majesty, this is... Saint, who was knocked back nearly 10 meters by the huge impact, walked over slowly. He glanced at the content of the white paper, and his face was extremely serious. A letter of challenge. Li Tianlan looked calm. He loosened his palm casually, and the letter of challenge fell from his hand. Before it fell to the ground, it had been broken into countless pieces. This person, Saint frowned tightly and muttered to himself. This person is a little interesting. Li Tianlan said casually, if I'm not mistaken, this should be the hidden master of the Jiang family. I was sure of his identity after reading the content of the letter of challenge. Because the night Jiang Shangyu went to the sanatorium, he asked me whether I would choose to be his friend or enemy. He walked slowly to the castle and said slowly, I just got off the plane, and the letter of challenge came. It's really fast. Your Majesty, the strength of the other party is not at the peak of the invincible realm. Saint, who was by his side, said word by word. He was also in the invincible realm. Although his realm had not been completely stabilized, if he was at the peak of the invincible realm, he would not have been directly swept away by the aftermath of a letter of challenge. No matter how big the gap between the peak of the invincible realm and the ordinary invincible realm was, it could not be so big. With only a letter, he drove the area thousands of meters above Emperor Dong's palace. This kind of strength had completely broken through the limit of the peak of the invincible realm. Yes. Li Tianlan nodded and said, "The information collected by military counselor is right. The other party can be said to be one of the strongest masters I have ever met. If we only talk about the masters in the field, he is the strongest." Li Tianlan had seen many masters. Wang Tianzong, who was supreme in Kendo, Lin Fengting and Li Guangtu, who were also in the field of Kendo. Together with himself, there was no doubt that he was the representative figure of Kendo in that era. Domain-type expert, he had seen many of them and even killed a few, such as Jiang Qianyan and Jiang Qiansong of the Jiang family of South America, Cass Rotter and Moraid, the former god of war of Star State, Paul of the Shadow Throne, and Gu Xingyun's sword formation. He had seen many similar experts, but he had never felt that any of them could represent the martial arts of this era. Until today, until just now. The domain that appeared and disappeared in an instant had become unbelievably sturdy. In a sense, it was no longer a domain, but a world. He had completely integrated his domain with heaven and earth, achieving the oneness of heaven and man. If he fought in this kind of domain, he could make himself unaffected, but it was also difficult for him to break such a domain in a short time. Li Tianlan could roughly determine the opponent's realm and combat capability, but he hadn't had the experience of fighting with a similar opponent. The momentum of the domain just now was amazing, but the domain dissipated too fast. The opponent still hid many things that he didn't want him to see. The only thing Li Tianlan could be sure of was that it was relative to the domain of the peak invincible realm, similar to Gu Xingyun's after breaking through the peak invincible realm. There had been some unexpected changes in the powerful domain. The opponent was indeed a somewhat tricky opponent. "Your Majesty, do you want to accept this challenge?" Saint asked in a low voice. "I have no possibility of refusing," Li Tianlan said calmly. He was Dong Huang now. He was His Majesty. He was invincible in the world. He was the chosen one of this era. In this position and this height, it was impossible for him to retreat even a little. He had to accept this challenge. Even if he retreated a little, he would be regarded as cowardice by outsiders. Anyway, we will meet in the final battle in Beihai. Compared with seeing through the opponent's details at that time, it is undoubtedly better to see the opponent's means 3 days later. Li Tianlan paused and said slowly, "Besides, I think after tonight, the whole dark world will know that someone will challenge me 3 days later. I have put myself in such a high position. It is easier said than done to come down." Saint wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes, stood in front of the castle gate, and glanced at the surrounding night sky. Countless sword cheese suddenly shot out in all directions with him as the center. The sword light was majestic and wanton, flying like a waterfall. The awe-inspiring sword light rushed out of Emperor Dong's palace in an instant and rushed through the street outside Emperor Dong's palace. At this moment, within the range of the sword energy, because everyone's state appeared clearly in Li Tianlan's perception. Most people behaved normally, but they felt that the surrounding temperature seemed to suddenly become a little colder. In different directions, there were also a few people who were pale and didn't dare to move, as if they were facing a formidable enemy. Li Tianlan twitched the corner of his mouth, and his awe-inspiring voice almost rang through the whole city. "Get out of here. Do an investigation tonight." Li Tianlan glanced at Saint and said, "Drive out some people who are suspected to be from other forces." "Okay." Saint nodded expressionlessly. As a new force in city, some mechanisms of Shenyuan City and Emperor Dong's palace were not perfect. Naturally, other forces in the dark world would not let go of the opportunity. In Shenyuan City, there were songs and dances, but there were always undercurrents around Emperor Dong's palace. No one knew how many pairs of eyes were secretly watching every move of Emperor Dong's palace. Before, Emperor Dong's palace didn't care about these things at all. For more than 2 years, there was nothing shameful about their every move. Occasionally, when they went too far, Li Baitian and Lin Yuxian would circle around and kill a few people, but they didn't kill them all. The existence of these people let them publicize some things, which was tantamount to improving the prestige of Emperor Dong's palace. Now that Li Tianlan was back, It could be said that Emperor Dong's palace really started to operate to create a dynasty in the dark world. Naturally, Li Tianlan would not allow some rats hiding in the dark with bad intentions around him. The only way was naturally to kill them all. Li Tianlan looked at the huge castle in front of him and suddenly shook his head. I won't go in. His eyes paused on Li Shi, and he seemed to be a little hesitant. Li Shi seemed to understand something and said slowly, Let me walk with you? No need. Li Tianlan smiled and shook his head. It's not necessary. Your Majesty, you, Saint said. Arrange their accommodations. Li Tianlan said blandly, I'll go to Heaven Capital to have a look. After a pause he said lightly, My Heaven Capital. His body flickered slightly. A dazzling sword light suddenly rushed up in Emperor Dong's palace. The shining sword light cut through the night, disappeared in an instant, and rushed directly to the south. Heaven Capital in Tiannan. That was the current headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital. Chapter 958. Before the rise of Emperor Dong's palace, Tiannan had been peaceful for more than 2 years. And it was foreseeable that even if Li Tianlan had returned to Shenyuan City and Emperor Dong's palace were still in the initial stage of accumulation. Emperor Dong's unimaginable wealth needed to be digested slowly. Mount Shu, Sai City, Jade Pool, and the most complicated Flourishing Age Fund and Samsara Palace also needed to be integrated slowly. The young people of Emperor Dong's palace also needed time to grow up. These things looked complicated, but in fact, they were not so messy. Situ Tsungyue, Dongqing Wudi, and Qin Weibai were here. Most importantly, Li Tianlan was here. This also meant that the integration process of various forces by Emperor Dong's palace might be complicated, but there would be no trouble or undercurrents. What Emperor Dong needed most now was time. Time to slowly digest these results. Judging from the assets and hidden resources of several superpowers, Emperor Dong didn't need to expand at all. As long as he digested the forces of Sai City, Mount Shu, Jade Pool, and Samsara Palace, with the establishment of the new group, Emperor Dong could already become one of the largest superpowers in Jianghu State and even the whole dark world. In other words, it was more beneficial for Emperor Dong's palace to keep a low profile than to expand in a high profile. Everyone could see this clearly. Naturally, Li Tianlan could understand it as well. So everyone could be sure that at least for the time being, the development of Emperor Dong's palace might not directly affect the pattern of Tiannan. Before Emperor Dong's palace was truly integrated, the young Emperor Dong would not rush to rule Tiannan. Because he needed time. This was indeed a simple matter of time for Emperor Dong's palace. But for other forces in Tiannan, as long as the day when Emperor Dong completely ruled Tiannan did not come, they still had a chance to turn the tables. No one could see where the opportunity was for the time being, but no one would deny that it did not exist either. Think optimistically. What if Emperor Dong died one day? After all, the Supreme Sword Emperor of Jianghu State could be killed by a sword. The growing heavenly sun might not be without accidents. Without Emperor Dong's palace, Tiannan was still their Tiannan. A Tiannan that became richer and even madder because of the existence of Emperor Dong. Over the past 2 years, Tiannan had experienced occasional turbulence in the dark, but most of the time it had been calm. Emperor Dong's palace had risen around them, and Li Tianlan had returned. So far, no force had withdrawn from Tiannan. Everyone was thinking about how to destroy Emperor Dong's palace and divide its property, but no one took any action. It was calm and peaceful. In the southernmost part of Tiannan, the 2 cities controlled by the Burning Legion were very calm. In the northernmost part of Tiannan, Ningbian City, which was occupied by the Freedom Corps, had begun to secretly prepare to merge with Shenyuan City. The 2 cities were equally harmonious. Freedom City, which was located in the middle of Tiannan, was a city where countless forces in the dark world gathered. It was a little chaotic, but it was only relatively speaking. Each force was more controlled, and there were no large-scale conflicts. Sky Capital City, which was at the same level as Liberty City, was even more stable and silent. More than 2 years ago, the Purgatory of Heaven Capital gradually withdrew from East Island, took root in Tiannan, and renamed the city Sky Capital City. The forces of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital gradually gathered, drove out all the other forces in the city, and began to keep a low profile as their headquarters. Today, the Purgatory of Heaven capital still had a lot of forces in East Island, but it was far from what it was 2 years ago. Its headquarters was in Tiannan, and instead of returning to Jianghu State, it also left East Island. Such an action made both Jianghu State and East Island dissatisfied, but it didn't touch the bottom line of either side. From the national point of view, both Jianghu State and East Island hoped to make Li Kuang-tu, a super combat force, and the huge force of the Purgatory of Heaven capital, a part of them. 2 years was not a long time, and both sides were still waiting for Li Kuang-tu's choice. Sky Capital City was quiet and depressing at night. Compared with the rapidly developing Shenyuan City, the headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven capital in Tiannan did not invest too much. When this place was not called Tiannan but belonged to Annan State, it was not a developed area in the relatively backward Annan State, and its development was extremely backward. Although it was called a city, a county, or even a more developed town in Jianghu State looked more prosperous than this place. Li Kuang-tu changed the name of the city, but he basically didn't change the facilities here. The magnificent sky-reaching pavilion that once appeared in East Island's Heaven capital was gone forever. The Purgatory of Heaven capital delineated an area in the center of the new Sky Capital City, and the plan was done casually. It was simple and pragmatic, striving to be safe and airtight, without any luxury. The headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven capital was located in an area about half the size of a small town in the city center. Only the elites of the Purgatory of Heaven capital could go in and out of the headquarters area freely, and no forces and civilians were allowed to approach. In fact, there were very few other forces and civilians here. The major forces would not give up their attention to the Purgatory of Heaven capital. But as the chaos in Snow Country grew longer and longer, people became more and more uncertain about Li Kuang-tu's state. After daybreak entered the invincible realm, almost no one came to Heaven capital to attack. The most important thing was that this was not Shenyuan City, and the Purgatory of Heaven capital had almost no investment here, so there was not much value in plotting. Now the personnel of other forces who stayed here were very complete, but they were also very few. Each organization basically had only 1 or 2 people staying here to monitor the situation of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. As for civilians, there were even fewer here. When this place still belonged to Tiannan, it was a relatively lively city compared to Ningbian and Tunnan. The permanent population was also more than that of the 2 cities in the north, about 200,000 people. As this area was named Tiannan, a considerable number of people fled back to Annan, and some went to the area controlled by the Burning Legion. When Shenyuan City was officially established and developed more than 2 years ago, most of the people who stayed here went to Shenyuan City. They were destined to have a hard time getting the right to live in Shenyuan City. But it was a city that was developing and expanding all the time, and there was no lack of resources and money. So they thought that there were enough job opportunities there, and at least they could eat their fill. The remaining small number of people went to Freedom City. Compared to the lifeless Sky Capital City, which had no desire to develop and had forcibly seized a large amount of land and food, Freedom City, where the major forces were in conflict with each other, had the opportunity to eat their fill compared to Sky Capital City. As a result, Heaven capital was even more desolate. According to rough statistics, there were only about 40,000 people in Heaven capital, of which nearly 30,000 belonged to the Purgatory of Heaven capital, and nearly 3,000 had now become the peripheral force of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. The rest were basically people who had nowhere to go or had no nostalgia for life. Vagrants, gamblers, drunkards, drug addicts, prostitutes. These people wandered around the periphery of Heaven capital like walking corpses. Overall, the whole Heaven capital was like a city with a lifeless interior and a city full of negative emotions outside. Corruption, depravity, madness, greed, ugliness, darkness. Outside the headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven capital, there seemed to be strong negative energy all the time. But Phoenix still liked it here. These 2 years were the happiest time of her life. She was pregnant and had a child. She was a little weak, but she would still often accompany her. Her man and child were growing up little by little. The situation was slowly stabilizing, and the atmosphere was gradually calming. Every day here was the happiest time for her. She liked Li Kuang-tu for many, many years. In order to follow in Li Kuang-tu's footsteps, she, who was not talented, became a superior of the half-step invincible realm and became one of the first 3 high-level people of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. In order to make Li Kuang-tu look at her more, she used all means. She did many tasks that others didn't want to do, and killed many people that others didn't want to kill. For decades, Li Guangtu secretly lurked in East Island. Phoenix's hands were full of blood, not only the blood of the enemy, but also the blood of her own people. So even inside the purgatory of Heaven Capital, many senior superiors didn't like her existence. At least she could clearly feel that Dawn, who had a similar status to her, had wanted to kill her more than once. Phoenix didn't care about these. The crazy state of treating a man as everything made her almost fearless. So for more than 20 years, she became the best sword in Li Guangtu's hand. In terms of combat capability, Phoenix was not as good as Dawn Daybreak, but she was indeed the best. It was just that this sword had extremely strong feelings. So when the purgatory of Heaven Capital entered the human world, when Li Guangtu brought Princess Ziyu back to East Island, but Ziyu couldn't get pregnant, on a special day, she found Li Guangtu and said that she didn't want to be his best sword, but his best woman. Li Guangtu, who lost his son, was extremely paranoid at that time, so he didn't refuse Phoenix's request. The pregnancy seemed to be going well. But what was difficult was that Phoenix had made countless preparations before that. The chaos in Snow Country broke out. Her and Li Guangtu's son was born. The purgatory of Heaven Capital came to Tiannan. Everything completely calmed down. During the recovery period, Li Guangtu often accompanied Phoenix, took care of her mood, and spoiled their child. She let go of her martial arts and her power in the purgatory of Heaven Capital. She gradually felt Li Guangtu's gentleness. In the past 2 years, she seemed to have changed from a good tool to a real woman. In the peaceful time in Tiannan, she, Li Guangtu, and her child were like the most ordinary family of 3. It was just that such good days seemed to have an end. When Li Guangtu left Heaven Capital for more than 3 days, although Phoenix no longer managed the specific affairs of the purgatory of Heaven Capital, she could still clearly feel the changes in the atmosphere inside the purgatory of Heaven Capital. The first to disappear was Li Guangtu. Then Dawn began to disappear with a large number of elites of the purgatory of Heaven Capital. Tiannan was still calm. But the purgatory of Heaven Capital had begun to stir. Phoenix began to feel restless. In just a few days, she had woken up from her dreams several times. She had asked Li Guangtu. But Li Guangtu seemed to have really regarded her as his own woman and protected her very well, so he didn't say anything to her. Phoenix didn't know what Li Guangtu wanted to do this time. But she knew Li Guangtu's ultimate goal very well. She could also understand why he casually set up the headquarters in Heaven Capital and let Heaven Capital continue to decay. Because Li Guangtu had never wanted to stay in Heaven Capital for a long time. His ultimate goal, the headquarters of his ideal purgatory of Heaven Capital, was Shenyuan City. It had always been. From another perspective, this goal was to kill Li Tianlan, which was what Li Guangtu wanted to do most now. Chapter 959. When he woke up from the nightmare once again, it was still a quiet and unchanging night outside the window. There seemed to be neat but light footsteps quietly walking in the distance, strictly guarding every corner of the vicinity. Phoenix, with a pale face and a cold sweat, sat on the bed in a daze. After a long while, she picked up her phone and looked at her watch. It was 10:23 in the evening. It had been less than an hour since she fell asleep. Phoenix subconsciously glanced at her side. The familiar and eager man was no longer there. Only a baby, who looked about 2 years old, was lying beside her. His hands and feet were wide open, and his breathing was even and quiet. Phoenix reached out her hand and gently touched the baby's soft face. She watched him reach out his chubby little hand and move it. A smile appeared on her pale face, and then she took a deep, deep breath. In the dream it was a strange space. All kinds of lights filled all senses. The surrounding buildings were blurry, but the crowd was extremely clear. Chi controlling, ice condensing, fire flaming, thunder shocking. The light of martial arts of various realms rendered the world in the dream into various colors. The domain of the invincible realm and the sword light crisscrossed. The chaotic explosions and roars kept ringing in his mind. There were figures everywhere. There were corpses everywhere. Blood was everywhere. The twisted faces roared as they charged in the same direction. In that direction, sword chi soared into the sky, crazily circling around, and the crowd kept falling. The people behind pressed forward without hesitation. Death and life bloomed violently in the sharp sword light. Corpses were everywhere, and blood flowed like a river. But from the beginning to the end, no one retreated. The sword light turned from strong to weak in a very short time. A figure in the middle of the crowd was covered with blood. Countless weapons pierced into every corner of his body. Blood flowed, the sword energy disappeared, and the figure clearly appeared in the dream. That was Li Guangtu's face. At that moment, Phoenix woke up with a start and subconsciously covered her wildly beating heart. Over the past few days, she had had several similar dreams. She didn't know why, although she had been telling herself to be optimistic, there was always a very pessimistic idea in her subconscious. In fact, when she was with Li Guangtu many times, she had hinted to him that she said the purgatory of heaven capital. In fact, it was already very good now. There was no need to pursue other things. She said that looking at the current purgatory of heaven capital, she was already very satisfied. She said that as long as he could be safe, even if the purgatory of heaven capital did not exist, it did not matter. Li Guangtu never expressed his stance. This silence lasted for more than 2 years until he suddenly left Heaven Capital City and went to Yuzhou from Shenyuan City, and then lost contact with her. Only then did Phoenix understand that Li Guangtu didn't listen to anything she said. His heart had always been extremely firm, resolutely doing what he thought he should do. Phoenix pulled out her mobile phone. After a moment of hesitation, she dialed Li Guangtu's number. "Sorry, the number you have dialed is unavailable." The cold voice sounded again and again, from Chinese to English. Feeling a little annoyed, she took out her phone, hesitated for a moment, and called Daybreak directly. The phone rang for a moment before it was picked up. Daybreak said hello. "Tomorrow?" After a brief silence, the Phoenix slowly spoke. Daybreak was silent for a moment, and then said slowly, "To be exact, we will leave in 2 hours. Phoenix was slightly surprised. "So soon?" "There was an accident. An hour ago, as soon as Li Tianlan returned to Emperor Dong's palace from Yuzhou, someone sent a letter of challenge to Li Tianlan. At present, it is not clear who the challenger is, but the other party showed the strength beyond the peak of the invincible realm in an instant. This matter has now spread throughout the dark world, and everyone's eyes are focused on Shenyuan City. This is a good opportunity. I will leave Tiannan for East Island as soon as possible." Daybreak said the news that could not be hidden in any way, and his tone was a little alienated. "What's the matter? Come to me." Phoenix looked at the sleeping child beside her and lowered her voice. "I have something to ask." Daybreak did not speak for a moment, as if thinking about how to refuse, but finally agreed. "Okay, I'll be right there." Although it was close to midnight, and any single man who approached Li Guangtu's woman would attract some suspicious eyes, Daybreak was undoubtedly not one of them. In the purgatory of heaven capital, he was the only superior of the invincible realm besides Li Guangtu, the real second-in-command, and also Li Guangtu's brother. He was absolutely trusted, and Daybreak did not need to worry about many things. The reason why he did not want to come was that he did not want to see Phoenix. Phoenix silently. She hung up the phone and was in a daze for a while. Then she found a more conservative pajamas and put them on. She bent down and kissed her son. Seeing that he showed no sign of waking up, she quietly got out of bed, went from the bedroom to the living room, and waited quietly. In less than 5 minutes, there was a knock on the door from outside. Phoenix pressed a button beside her hand, and the door opened automatically. Daybreak walked in. "Haven't rested yet?" He sat opposite Phoenix and asked in a casual tone. "I slept and woke up." Phoenix's voice was faint. She paused and smiled bitterly. "I've been a little uneasy these days, and I've been having nightmares. I feel that His Highness will be in danger. Can you tell me where he is now?" "Don't worry." Daybreak looked at her for a while and said slowly, "I know His Highness's strength very well. Even if there's any danger, he can escape unscathed." "You," Phoenix carefully probed, "are you going to participate in the final battle in Beihai?" "I don't know." Daybreak answered without hesitation, "My task is to go to East Island. As for His Highness, when I last talked to him, he was still in Yuzhou. I don't know where he is now. Maybe he's in East Island." His tone was very formal, but Phoenix still heard the perfunctory tone in it. Phoenix had a complicated look in her eyes. "Or, the one who appeared in Shenyuan City tonight to challenge Li Tianlan is His Highness?" "Definitely not." Daybreak was speechless. "You think too much. His Highness is not that bored." Although he has the strength, according to His Highness's character, hiding in the dark is his favorite. But this challenge has indeed attracted a lot of attention. We can transfer more people to East Island while everyone's attention is diverted. Heaven, capital of East Island. Daybreak's eyes dimmed, and he said softly, I don't like that country, but I really miss the sky-reaching pavilion in Heaven, capital of East Island. His Highness's intention this time is also very simple. To regain control of the dark forces in East Island, that's our bottom line. Phoenix looked at him for a while and suddenly asked, Who will go to East Island with you this time? Daybreak was stunned and didn't speak for a while. Give me a list. Phoenix's tone was a little tough. Daybreak hesitated for a while, and then slowly nodded. Okay. You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.